Everyone's too quiet. I don't like this.
Hi, Midval.
Hello.
Does that help, Dustin?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I'm glad you talked because I couldn't tell there was no sound at all. So I didn't I didn't know if my speakers were not working or what.
Hello, Dustin. Hello, Kane.
Hello, Paul.
Hi, council members.
Hello, everyone.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear. Looks like we got 4 of us on, 5 of us on. Well, more than that.
Justin, did you get a haircut?
I did, just one of them.
Just one single one?
Yeah, but it was a really long one, so. Actually, I just got the sides done. The top's the same length.
I'm surprised you didn't put any steps or, you know, maybe a dragon or something in there.
Next time.
Promise. Kane, I think this is the first time we've actually seen you at home.
I know. That's why I was petting my dog. I'm tending the dog because my wife got counseled tonight too. So it's my turn to tend the dog.
What kind of dog is it?
It's a mini Aussie.
Oh,
I thought Kane lived at City Hall. I thought that was.
I did too. I literally what I was hinting as. I didn't know if he ever left.
So this is Hank.
What a cutie.
Oh,
He is so cute. Oh my gosh. He needs to come to City Hall again.
So cute. Can you show the puppy again, please?
No.
Like, who are these people?
Where is the puppies?
Kane, talk so the camera switches to you.
I don't know.
Oh,
There you
so
go.
sweet.
So if I talk, then my screen comes up. So that's
Yep.
him.
I need the pen.
That's Hank.
Aw.
I'm just
He's
going
a
to throw
barrel
this
of
out
fun.
there, Kane. Kane, if you ever need a dog sitter or someone just to snuggle that thing for a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a
You-
list.
The worst thing about him is he loves people. I've never seen a dog that takes to people like he does.
That's sweet. Sweet puppy.
Maybe we need that once we're back in chambers. Maybe we need to have a bring your pups to chamber day. Actually, I don't know if I'd get anything done though, to be honest.
I would bring all 3 of mine.
We might too.
Dustin, is that from the Seinfeld set?
It is, yeah.
That is awesome. I'm like, that looks very much like Jerry Seinfeld's house. That's awesome.
Thanks. I wish my apartment was that neat, though.
We were waiting on the mayor.
Mhm.
Is someone Mayor Pro Tem who can just start the meeting?
Who's the mayor pro tem, Rory?
It is Quinn. Is Quinn there?
I was literally about to leave this meeting if you were going to say my name. Something really almost just came up that didn't.
Quinn's
I
not.
would have had some pretty serious technical difficulties as well, Bryant.
I mean, you just have to say
Quinn's
meeting.
not on. Who's next?
Heidi.
Heidi, you're the mayor.
Heidi, just say you call this meeting to order.
It's your meeting.
Oh, do I really just have to say that, Dust?
And if you have a gavel, you can.
I have a water bottle. Does that count?
That works.
Do we want to give him a minute? Or should we get
I
started?
think we need to go ahead and start. We got 3 items on the workshop, so we ought to get going.
All right, then I call this meeting to order.
Okay, first
Anybody?
item on our agenda is Rochelle Hobbs was going to make presentations from Salt Lake County Recorder's Office.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. And let me know if you can see what I'm seeing.
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. My name is Rochelle Hobbs. I'm your Salt Lake County Recorder. I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be with you, Midvale City Council, this evening.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm often asked what the County Recorder's Office does. We record every transaction that has to do with real property. We maintain a database of over 14 million documents. This year so far, we have already recorded over 157,000 documents, and we are on target to have a record-setting year in recordation. We do all of this with 42 employees, and I'm confident I have the hardest working team in Salt Lake County. We've been operating as an essential service during this whole pandemic, and we've been able to stay open with the mitigation measures that we've taken, and I'm very proud of that. This is a picture. I'm in the back of our skeleton crew wearing our masks. If you were to make an appointment with the County Recorder's Office, chances are someone in this picture is going to help you. And we've experienced unprecedented times as our office has responded to this pandemic. Despite these challenges, we continue to provide critical services to the public and be innovative. Our office has seen an average increase in documents of 40% in the first half of the year. There's been some discussions about why the market is so hot and why we're seeing an increase in volume and it's holding. I think that has something to do with the low interest rates. Also, I've read in articles that with people staying home during this time, they're realizing that maybe that house that they're living in isn't fitting their needs. They need something bigger or they're ready to downsize. So whatever the case may be, we continue to see this increase in work hold. In 2019, we worked to establish collaborative relationships with our fellow county recorders and with our fellow elected officials here. We met with many of the major title companies prior to COVID. And I have been appointed in my first year of office to the Utah Association of Counties for a leadership role. And I enjoy that and serve in that capacity, and that's been exciting as well. Community outreach and service is important to me. We visited all 16 Salt Lake County senior centers and offered them copies of their complete property record. And we looked up thousands of records and were able to serve hundreds of people by bringing government and this office to them. And in going to these senior centers and doing outreach, I realized a need, and that was to provide information to property owners about their property and not necessarily having them have to request the information, which leads us into Property Watch. In these recent months, our homes have taken on the added role of office, classrooms, and a refuge from the virus. One thing remains the same, and that is the American dream of home ownership. To protect your property record, we have launched a new free service called Property Watch. This service notifies Salt Lake County property owners when something is recorded on their property. I believe this is a great resource that will help prevent title fraud while protecting your property record and offers peace of mind, which I think is something we all could use a little more of right now. We currently have over 6,900 registrants. We have a goal of hopefully hitting 7,000 by the end of this week. And your efforts in helping us increase that number would be greatly appreciated. If you visit the Salt Lake County Recorder's website, if you do a Google by Salt Lake County Recorder, it'll populate, or go to slco.org/recorder, it'll get you there. and click on Property Watch, there's three lines of information, as you can see in this visual, that we'll need. Your Salt Lake County address and your contact information. And then once you give us 1 and 2, that'll populate the parcel number. And then once you hit apply, you'll get a confirmation email from the county recorder's office. And it's that easy. And then going forward, you'll be notified whenever something is recorded on your property. This next slide is showing you some of the feedback that we've received so far from Property Watch subscribers. In Midvale, we have 181 registrants so far. So if you have neighbors or friends that haven't registered or don't know about Property Watch, if you could help us spread that information about it, that would be wonderful. But as you can see, powerful, useful, opens up conversations, better understanding. These are some of the words used to describe Property Watch from the subscribers. And I think that's great. And that's its intention. And that's the purpose of it, is to give the property owners information about their property. And then again, I know you have a loaded agenda, and I see that part of it is a closed session, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but for 2020, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, keep up with the critical work that we do, and continue to be innovative and focus on people, process, and product. And as I mentioned before, and I said it a couple of times, I have a great team, and we're here. So if you need to do anything in person, you can call, make an appointment. If you haven't already subscribed to Property Watch, I hope that you will do so. And if your agenda allows, I'm available for questions if you have time.
Are you seeing a whole lot of people refinancing? Is that what you were trying to say during the
Yes,
presentation? Yeah, I would imagine.
myself included.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that. And making sure that their property record is in order with these challenging times, making sure that it's the way they want it to be.
Cool. Well, thanks for all that you do. I know you guys are kind of the unsung heroes in the county building.
Thank you. I'll tell my team that. I appreciate that. There is a lot
I just
of
signed
focus.
up. So
Yeah,
we'll
thank
see.
you. Was it
See how that
easy?
goes. Yeah, very, very.
Sweet. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about what people are doing right now. And you mentioned the word unsung heroes. And I do think that's appropriate for this team because we've been here working throughout and we will continue to do so. So if you could post this on your website, maybe a link or include it in a newsletter, that would be wonderful. We appreciate any assistance in getting the word out. We would greatly appreciate.
Our communications director is in the meeting, and we will have her do that. And we really
Thank you.
appreciate this information.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for all you do for your city of Midvale. And I'll include my email address if you have any questions or concerns. I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you,
ya.
Dustin. Thank you all. Appreciate
Thank-
it. Thank you so much.
I got a email back from the mayor indicating that he couldn't find the link on Teams. Is anyone coordinating with him to help him get that?
It's not on Teams, it's on,
Zoom. Sorry,
Zoom.
that would probably be why that would make sense.
that would be the problem. Yeah.
Jake, can you do that, please?
Okay, should I just go ahead?
Yeah, Matt, just to let everyone know, I just got a call from Chief Masner, and I believe he's in the meeting. Chief Thomas had a family emergency and has had to leave, so he will not be available tonight. Chief Masner will be filling in for him, and he'll be answering questions on your items. So hope everything goes well for Chief Thomas. Wish him the best.
Just want to make sure everyone can hear me.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, just let's see, before I get going, a couple quick things. The first is that a request had been made that we send out a list of who's going to be attending and have access to our meetings tonight from the outside. So we, just a little bit ago, I sent out a Excel spreadsheet to everyone that lists who will be in our meeting tonight. It also indicates what agenda item they're going to be on so that you can see that. Also, a little bit ago, my item now is to talk about the feasibility study, the final version of it. We just put the finishing touches on it this afternoon. And so I sent out a version to you guys about half an hour before the meeting started, as well as a letter that was sent to us by the sheriff. So those are in an email from earlier this afternoon. And with that, I also just, we have a couple of people from 𝐏𝐿𝐜 on the line who, if you have any questions that I'm not able to answer, that they'll help out as well. So with that, this is part 3 of the UPD feasibility study mini-series. And I'm going to try to keep it pretty short today since we've probably covered 80–90% of the information in previous meetings. I'm just going to try to tie it up here tonight. So I'm going to share my screen. Is it good to go? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. As we've discussed before, we hired 𝐏𝐿𝐜 Robertson Birmingham to prepare the feasibility study looking at annual operations and startup. We reviewed data from a variety of municipalities with a focus on Riverton, Murray, and South Salt Lake. Riverton because of it was the last city to leave UPD, Murray and South Salt Lake because of the similarities that they have to us with regards to policing. We discussed budget implications of the withdrawal with representatives of UPD and interviewed police chiefs and experienced police officers to get their input on the information together. As we looked at this, the important considerations always again to remember is that every police department is different and can be structured in a different way. Feasibility study is not intended to be an operations plan, but rather we're looking at trying to and to estimate what the budget would need to be in order to run the department. But if we were ever to act on this, it would always be the city council, city manager, and if there was a new police chief, they'd be the ones who would actually set up the operations and determine what the department would look like. We asked the consultant for the feasibility study to take a very conservative approach in their estimating. And because we were looking at it from this conservative approach, one of the things that we did not anticipate or try to put into here is what opportunities or what savings we could have from partnering with other entities. And so when we have these numbers, one of the areas where we're conservative is based off of the understanding that we're going to be providing all the services on our own. At the last meeting, there were a couple things that were asked for us to look into that we're going to present some more information on tonight. One of them is to look at providing higher wages to the officers and sergeants. Specifically, we looked and tried to figure out what it would take to provide wages that are in the top 10% in Utah. Additionally, we've provided a little bit more information on sort of what we would consider to be a best case startup scenario. Specifically, this would be if we didn't actually have to pay anything from the exit formula with UPD. And then we were asked to include some information on the impact of Taylorsville's withdrawal. So starting at the bottom of that list first, last week, the UPD Board of Directors during their meeting directed the UPD staff to put together a tentative budget that would show them not passing on any budget impacts from Taylorsville's departure from UPD. They also asked, in addition to that, that the tentative budget include a 5% increase in salary for officers and sergeants. Now, this tentative budget would be for FY22, the year that UPD would no longer, or I'm sorry, Taylorsville would no longer be in UPD. And the big caveat there is that it's a non-binding resolution or motion that they passed. And so while this is the direction and they'll put together a plan based on that direction, we won't actually know if it will be put into place until next June when they vote on the 2022 FY22 budget. In addition to that, after the meeting and in response to a letter that we sent to UPD describing what our role will be in the organization going forward, specifically identifying areas where we intend to focus on trying to help reform the organization, we received a letter from Sheriff Rivera. And in that letter, it indicated that it reaffirmed the direction that the board of directors had directed their staff to follow. And then it also discussed the fact that they will be looking at a potential organizational restructuring for UPD. Now, we had hoped that we would be able to provide a little bit more information in the feasibility study about the specifics of how that budget would impact Midvale, or in the case that it doesn't, which is what the direction was from the board, how they would go about impacting regional services and precincts in order to make it so that it didn't impact us. While we've had some conversations with UPD about how that may occur, we haven't received anything in writing that shows the details on how that would occur. So that was not included in the feasibility study. We've asked Chief Mazrin to be on the meeting today so that once I get done with my presentation, if he has any further information about the potential impacts of adjusting the budget for Taylorsville's withdrawal, he can provide that afterwards or answer any questions. Now, just as a quick reminder, as we've been looking at the staffing from the feasibility study, we've been looking at having a range of 52 to 56 officers with a total amount of staffing required for a police department being 62 to 68.5. That in addition to the officers, that includes civilians that would be part of the police department and civilians in other departments of the city. As we look at the startup costs, there is a huge range of costs that's potential if we were to start our own police department, ranging from $2.7 million up to $7.7 million, so $5 million gap. Now, as I go through this slide and the next slide, there's a few different variables that we're going to be looking at. First, you'll see that we're talking about what it would look like if we had 52 officers or 56 officers. And then in addition to that, the variants on it are, what would it look like in the best case but unlikely scenario that we would have no exit fee from the formula that was put in place in UPD a year ago? What would it look like if we had the high wage, which meant that we were paying our officers in the top 10% and had no fee? What would it look like if we just had 52 officers? And then what would it look like if we had just 52 officers and high wage? And then the same thing for the 56. Anyway, even though I'm showing you all these different variants, part of it because of the request from the last meeting, we really think that the range that we're talking about for the startup costs is the one that's just 52 officers and 56 officers. So basically the $5.1 million to the 7.4. So there's that $2 million range. As a quick reminder, the real variable on that exit formula has to do with the pension liabilities, which can range from $2 million to $3 million, depending on how many officers would leave UPD and join Midvale. Now, as we've discussed before, there's a lot of different angles on how we would look at that negotiation on that particular issue, but just because we've covered it before, I'll just leave it at that. As we look at the annual operations, what this will include would be, of course, the cost for staff, the cost for maintaining and equipment and buying equipment and facilities, and then the financing of the startup costs. We again looked at those same sort of variables depending on whether it was 52 or 56 officers. So again, that's what would it look like if there was no exit fee? What would it look like if we had high wages, et cetera? As you could see, there's a pretty big difference between sort of the lowest cost option, which is no exit fee for 52 officers, and 56 officers with the exit fee and a high wage. That's the $10.8 million on the bottom. Now, again, the green rows here, 52 officers and 56 officers, is what we consider to be the true estimate that we have in the feasibility study, with the other options just sort of, again, looking at some of the information that was requested in the last meeting. So we really believe that the range is probably somewhere between $8.7 and $9.7 million annually. However, I also wanted to show in here the yellow rows, yellow rows show what the FY21 fee is that Midvale pays as a member of UPD. And we also show what the actual budget is. Just as a quick reminder, we pay a fee to UPD, but that doesn't necessarily always cover the total budget cost for running Midvale's operations. Things like fund balance and some other things like that help lower our costs below what the budget is. Now, what this slide shows is that for the most part, if we're looking at a department that has the 52 officers, it pretty much means that the cost annually is going to range somewhere between a cost savings and running just about the same as what it costs to be part of UPD. When we jump up to the 56 officers in all three scenarios, again, without an exit fee, with an exit fee, high wages, et cetera, those all put us above what the current budget is for running Midvale. I hope that clarifies and answers some of the questions that came out of the last meeting. We've gone over this before, but just real quick, under the scenarios that we're looking at, we can see that as a cost per capita, our feasibility study looks at having a cost per capita that is either lower than the average in the case of having 52 officers or above when we have 56. To some extent, I think that shows that we're kind of zeroed in a pretty good place. Additionally, as we look at the officers per capita, we also would have a similar number to what Murray has, and we're a little bit below average overall with our estimates, but pretty close. And then finally, just as a reminder too, that when it comes to the cost per call, which is an important way of trying to assess whether or not the costs that we have estimated are in line with what we're seeing in other communities. It turns out that, again, compared to the communities that we've been comparing ourselves against, the cost per call comes in at a pretty good, close to what the average is, but is well below it if we go to the 52 officers. Now, again, I cut out a lot of things that are in the study because we've covered them before. If there's anything that you would like me to go back over from previous meetings or provide further information on, I'd be happy to do that. Otherwise, this would be the wrap up of the feasibility study. There is no action or anything on tonight's agenda with regards to anything regarding UPD. In addition to that, as I mentioned before, Chief Mazarin is here if you have any questions for him, as well as we have our consultants here if you have any questions for them. Was that a Matt Dahl 10 minutes?
Matt, you said 15 minutes, and I feel like that was a Matt Dahl 15 minutes.
All right.
I don't have any further questions.
Hey, Chief Mazarin, what are your feelings about how much of the pooled services will be affected by this cut?
Pooled services, the shared services that we have will be affected dramatically in terms of what we're looking at right now is doing a complete reorganization and combining all of those areas under one group. And then so we'd essentially have, a regional services division or shared services division and investigations division. And then as we've gone through, I've been working on this project now for a few weeks, working with all of those shared services commanders, with the precinct commanders. Chief Thomas has been involved in those discussions, worked very closely with Lisa Dudley to go through the entire budget, every line, look at the proportionate share, what belongs to Taylorsville, remove that out, and then do that all under the idea of asking ourselves what really has value to our members and what's really important, and what could we overlap to make it more efficient, and how do we look at it from a new perspective, and just do this hard reorganization of the department. So part of that discussion will obviously not only involve like a lot of our command level, but we've had some really good ideas from supervisors and officers, and we're also going to be getting some input from our board members and our different committee members to really reimagine the whole department and look at it moving forward. So we've been able to, we know we have to cut about 4.2 million, but we've been able to build a model that does that. It does involve losing some things. It does involve the reduction in some services. But we're trying to decide, as we're moving forward, what's important or what supports our central core mission of making sure we have good public safety in the community with our, supporting our patrol officers through the shared services.
So I guess my question is, from your perspective, can we actually do this and make it work so that it works for all the cities?
Yes. And I'm glad you brought that up, because a model I had built actually a few months ago, as I was having some of these theoretical discussions with the sheriff and others, is what does it look like if there's no Taylorsville or no Midville or no Salt Lake County? What number does that mean if we weren't to reduce any services? And all of the partners in UPD all have skin in the game, so to speak. And so this reorganization is not just beneficial, obviously, to Midville, but it would be necessary for everyone involved.
And I guess that's what is important to me, is that it's like, I want, if we're going to stay here, which, right now we are, is that it's beneficial to everybody involved, not just Midville. This has got to be an organization that helps one another and makes it so that we really, we want to stay because it's a great organization, not just because we're stuck in it. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes,
and I just want to make sure you're confident that from a police perspective, because I'm not a policeman, that we can actually do this and make it work.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. It's what I said earlier about, the conversation that I had with the sheriff and the undersheriff when we started this is doing just that. What has value? What makes our organization a place that people want to be and a place that people would want to join? What are the hardest things to do in policing? By doing them together, it's less expensive, more efficient for all of us. So that's kind of the lens that these conversations have gone on through, is looking at some of those key components and making sure that we come up with a product at the end of the day that's, it's going to be leaner, but that still provides effective policing.
Thank you for those comments.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the police department feasibility study? I apologize for getting in late. I thought we was on a Teams meeting, and then I went to Zoom, but I failed to turn my Teams off, and it wouldn't let my camera work. So I had to completely shut down Teams and then open up Zoom, and now I'm here. So I apologize. Okay. Are we ready for public gathering ordinance amendment, Lisa?
I'm ready.
Okay.
So this discussion is regarding the a proposed ordinance with respect to special events on public property that will be contained in Chapter 12 of the Midville City Ordinance. In light of current events and some interest in having public gatherings within the on public property, we needed to look at our ordinances and see what we have. Currently, the city only regulates events that require events that have 500 or more people. So we really don't have anything that regulates smaller events. Many communities have adopted an ordinance such as this to mitigate the impact of special events on that on the public property or with residents with respect to regulating their impacts that it has on traffic or police services or fire or the health and safety of the public. So as we are in the process of drafting this ordinance, we have a couple of things that we looked at. The current draft includes regulation of events like athletic events, block parties, demonstrations, entertainment events, and filming events, things like that. And it is these events that happen on public property and have 50 or more participants. It also regulates events that no matter how many people that would consume or take up the general use of public property. So the proposed ordinance that we have would require a permit for these kinds of activities. The organizer of the event would submit an application to the city. The city would review the application and make sure that there are adequate measures in place to protect the public health, to mitigate impact on traffic, noise, things like that. It would also be able to recover some of the cost of these services by charging a fee for these permits. Services like police, fire, emergency, medical protection, road closures, traffic control, cleanup, just these services that would be directly related to the special event. Now, spontaneous events or demonstrations would be exempt from this ordinance, as that would be as required by the First Amendment. The First Amendment requires that we allow for spontaneous events or demonstrations on public property. It is anticipated that this ordinance will be limited to establishing procedures for the special event permits on public property. Specific guidelines for the special events will be adopted as policy and available to the public. The reason that we want to do this is that we want to have specific guidelines that an event organizer or an event has to follow, and it would be tailored to that use. So, for example, if we were to require liability insurance for someone using the park, we would want to know what the use is that they intend to use the park for. If we are having a 100-person gathering of everyone doing meditation, the liability would probably not be the same as if we had an MMA tournament at the park, right? So those kinds of specific guidelines will be a policy, and we feel that that allowing it as a policy that would allow the city the flexibility to adjust the mitigation measures without having to come back and amend the ordinance. So as we draft the ordinance, we would like some guidance from the council with respect to a few things. One thing I want the council to keep in mind as we have been vetting through these issues is that the application of this ordinance has to be uniform and consistent. So as you think about things as we go through a few of these areas of clarification, keep in mind that we may think of the football league as one person we may exclude from this ordinance, but any like type of sporting event, we then would have to exclude. So for example, the things that we would need, that we'd like some guidance on is that, are there any activities or categories that you would like excluded from this ordinance? For example, I don't know that we need to put block parties in this ordinance. Other than harvest days, I'm not sure if block parties occur in Midvale, but if they do, I think they occur primarily on private property unless they close a street, which is a different issue. But that might be something that the council feels isn't necessary in this ordinance. The one thing we had talked about as we were going through all of these variables is, for example, the Little League football. They use our park to do the games and the practices. Do we exclude that type of activity from requiring a permit? As we discussed it, I'm leaning towards not excluding them for the reason I talked about with the MMA tournament example. I think that we could do something along the lines like requiring a permit once a year for reoccurring events like the football, like the Little League football. Does anybody have any issues with or any categories that you would like excluded that we've talked about? So the other issue that if you had some guidance is that, is there anything that you would like included that's not on this list? I have no examples because I can't think of anything that we didn't include, but if there's any, if you see a need that of an event, then we might, that we haven't included as a category, we might want to do that. The other thing, does anyone have any thoughts on the 50-person threshold?
Lisa, my only comment was going to be on that. I think 50 is too high.
Too high. Okay.
Too high. I think 50 people, is a lot in the setting of public health. I mean, normal times, pre-COVID, 50 people on city property would be a good thing because you'd say, oh my God, look at all these people out and about. But at this point, I think that 50 is too many. I think what this ordinance should be geared towards is allowing small family and friend gatherings and not necessarily, 50 people's kind of a large event to be on city property. We're not talking about 50 people in Rio Tinto Stadium, but 50 people all gathered at the city park for an event is a lot of people in the light of our current health environment.
Right. So, it is in with that perspective, outside of a COVID world, would 50 be, because we as the phase guidelines are going on right now, we have those regulations within our public parks. So would 50 be too high in quote unquote normal circumstances?
No, I don't think so. I think you're right about that. If you were bringing this up in January of 2020, we'd probably all say 50 is fine, or maybe up it to 100.
Yeah.
But again, my fear is that 50 people is, and we're not saying that you can have a 50-person or more event. You just have to go through the following stuff that's outlined for you. So I don't think, maybe if no one else thinks 50 is too high, then maybe we just go with that. But that was my initial thought.
The thing is, a lot of families get together with family reunions, and I've easily seen over 50 people just in one family if you get relatives and stuff and they have a party together. I mean, that's really not that many people as far as family type things happen.
As an
Well,
East
we're-
Coast person, if I had 50 family members at an event, I would be horrified. But I realize it's much more common around here.
I could easily get 50 people just with my own family and kids. So, and if I had any extended family, I could easily go over 100 pretty easy.
It's true.
What's hard about this is a family of 50 or more getting together is where we see outbreaks. A park where you have people wearing masks watching a soccer or football game is less likely where you're going to see outbreaks. So the 50 number doesn't necessarily bother me in our public spheres. If people have to follow, something I want to talk about, like some sort of mask resolution. I'm getting a lot of crap on that in my email, and I'd like to push a mask resolution in support of, for schools and for public spaces anyways. And I'd like to, where people are social distancing and wearing masks, the rate of transmission is super low and family parties are super high. So the number 50 doesn't bother me one way or the other. It's the application of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you raise a good point. I mean, a lot of cities, and my first inclination too, was to try to carve out some sort of exception for the small family gatherings. But as the medical evidence is showing, that's where a vast majority of new cases are coming from. So, that's a very good point, Bryant. So maybe it isn't the number that we should focus on, but the measures that we have in place to make sure that everyone is meeting in the public sphere safely.
What about the
And-
block parties? With that being on private property, I almost feel like that needs to be excluded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so for sure. We can, if you have one in your backyard and want to invite 55 people and all of you get COVID, it's nothing we can do anything about.
Right. And this is only on public property. So this is if a block party wants to close a public street. And this is specifically whether or not that event needs to get a permit. I think that part of the guidelines that would be as part, what we want to do is have a policy that is in line, or that is in effect at the time we hopefully bring this back to you and get a vote on this ordinance, is a guideline that would include, compliance with state and county public health orders. And we would want to make sure that is in place. But with respect to block parties, that was one thing where I thought, we looked at ordinances in various cities, and this ordinance is closely resembles Salt Lake City's ordinance. And they included block parties. Again, I think that is something we could probably exclude, minus closing the street. So that was one thing. And if there's anything else that, any other categories that you feel should be excluded, I'd be interested in that as well.
Isn't there a pretty big block party that takes place at the park? I thought I had heard of one in years past. So that one I wouldn't want to exclude that one.
Right. And that's the issue that again, that I the unintended consequences of what we see as a block party, that someone else calling it a block party and then makes it so they don't have to get a permit. I think that we could probably put a block party that involves the use of public property, and maybe that would get around block parties that happen primarily on private property. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that's a good point. And that's the other thing. One of the we had on here a discussion of fee waivers. Right now in our ordinance, we are suggesting or that we will have in the ordinance an indigent circumstances type of fee waiver. So if an event organizer said, we can't afford your fees, we would have a process by which they could be where those fees could be waived. Right now, the only waiver of the fees is for someone claiming indigency. So and I would recommend that we leave it there. I think that we have gone back and forth, and when I say we, I mean Garrett and I, about whether or not we would you might want to waive fees for a nonprofit. But there again, if a group, let's say, for example, a white supremacy group wants to have an event in the park, you might not be as inclined to let them waive their fees. So I would suggest just keeping it to someone who have an indigency standard as opposed to like a nonprofit. Does anybody have an issue with that?
I mean, are there any not-for-profit exempt white supremacy groups out there?
I would bet there is. Or they could probably find a nonprofit that would support them in their application for a permit, something along those lines. I'm just saying that the underlying application of this ordinance has to be uniform, and we can't just pick groups that we allow permits. As we've researched this, there are the well-established principles of content, viewpoint neutrality can't be a factor in determining who gets an special event permit. We can't restrict someone from spontaneously having a demonstration on public property. But things like the waiving of the fees, or how much, or recovering some of the costs that cities have to deal with after these events, and or requiring liability insurance and what kind, those things are still kind of being defined by the courts. Specifically, 10th Circuit is not clear in terms of which way that goes. So we're trying to create an ordinance that is obviously compliant with the existing case law, but also affords the protections to the city where we can mitigate some of these impacts that these special events can have on the city.
Lisa, I got a question for you regarding this Little League football. Should I give them your contact info? Somehow I got in like the middle. They're going back and forth. They texted me like the contract like today, and they were like, so if we get like the Salt Lake County like waivers or whatever, are they, are we good? And I haven't responded yet because now I'm like over my head. But how does that work if we pass this ordinance? Can we make them do 2 applications, or since we're sort of just contracted in to this original agreement that says, whether it's in green or applicable with, other county or state ordinances, if they're following the county or state ordinances, can we throw another thing on top of them? Are we allowed to do that?
You mean another thing is in terms of
like an
requiring a permit?
Yeah.
Well, we can. I mean, obviously, this hasn't, it's not in effect, so it wouldn't apply to them, this season if we get the contract in and they,
That's what I was wondering. If we passed it in 3 or 4 weeks or whatever, they're 3 games into the season, can we come to them and be like, now you have to do this permit?
I think that I mean, if it's in effect mid-season, I mean, that is something we need to talk about. And that's the other issue with How are we going to handle something like the Little League football, the events, in terms of, are we going to, one thing that we've talked about is, if we have, if an event or an entity, an organizer has a contract with the city, maybe they don't need a permit, which the Little League football would fall in that category. Where these events like the Little League football affect many different departments, we also think it would be helpful to have an event permit requirement for something like that, because then we have public works and parks, and we have planning and other issue, other departments that probably need to be consulted before we have these activities in the park. So we're going back and forth on that. If you have some suggestions, I'd be happy. With respect to a mid-season type of permit requirement, I think that we could work with them on that. With respect to the COVID issue, we did discuss that today. They are welcome. You're welcome to give them my number, contact information to discuss the contract. Andrea Andreessen is also very well informed on this, and I think that's been their contact person. So yeah,
I just don't think they were getting the response. They weren't getting timely responses on that. I think that's why it fell to me.
Okay.
And they're getting worried because they handed out, football helmets like on Monday.
Right, or they didn't get the responses they wanted.
Yeah.
Because I know that the contract we have felt that initially, that while the county is not in green phase with respect to the COVID requirements, that we probably couldn't allow games. But I know Kane can speak to this. We looked into, we don't want to be the only program that's not allowing games in the county, if that makes sense. So, and as long as they comply with the phase guidelines, I don't know that we can keep them from doing that either. So
I think that's a worthy discussion, to be honest, because I know there are some even football coaches now in Utah who are questioning why there's a rush to have a season. So, I'm more sensitive to that than maybe other folks here, but I don't really see the value of having a youth football season during the middle of a pandemic, which the president noted was going to get worse before it got better today.
Does anybody have any comments or anything? It is possible. I mean, the final product may have some noticeable changes and differences from the one that's provided to you. I'll obviously point those out and we'll discuss those. But if you have any, as you think about this, ideas or concerns about us drafting this ordinance, just let me know.
We have a contract with them that tells them like guidelines and stuff. So if they're trying to meet them, that's right. Like, I don't know why we're rushing back either, but because the contracts contemplated COVID when we initially started it, right?
Oh, yes.
So I have this.
And they've had the contract, I believe, for a few weeks reviewing it. So I
just have this weird, like, I just don't know where I stand from like an attorney, or from like, we made this contract with them, and I don't know.
Right. With respect to this discussion on the special event, that's separate from the contract issue with the COVID related.
Right. No, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think we have a problem. I mean, with the contract that we have in place now, or not in place, that we have given to them, but haven't seen back. I believe Kane can step in on this, but I think that we're good with the games.
Is that right, King?
Yeah, we're going to work with the league. It appears the surrounding cities and surrounding programs are moving ahead. We're going to try and work with the league to see what we can do to facilitate them with their games, as long as they take the responsibility to make sure that they're following the guidelines from the health department and those kind of things. Yeah, that was going to be part of my report, is we're trying to work through some of those issues as we're getting pressure now from groups to reopen some of our facilities. And so Public Works has been working on the details of how that would impact them, or what other services that we may have to contract for that. And so we're working on that as we speak. In fact, that was a large part of our discussion today in staff meeting.
I mean, could we eliminate allowing spectators?
I guess that would be not up to us to police. I would think that would be the league themselves to police, and the youth conference in general. If they come up with guidelines that say no spectators, then they should police that.
Okay.
But they could also find somewhere else to play their games that's not our city park.
Yeah, the way the youth conference works is they I think they play in our park every other Saturday, approximately. So they play an away game one week, and then the next Saturday they're home. And so the whole Hillcrest, Midvale Hillcrest League is there. You know, I'm open to guidance and direction from the city council on this, because this is a tough spot. We don't want to be the only city that's saying, hey, you're not gonna play on our fields, and therefore you don't have a program, and kills the Hillcrest youth conference program. So yeah, if you have some other thoughts on what we should do with this, I'd love to hear them. We're kind of in between a rock and a hard spot on this, frankly. This morning, most of us were leaning to just keeping everything closed, but with some of the pressures we're getting, and surrounding cities have opened up a lot of their facilities. Matt did a survey today and got a lot of information on what surrounding cities are doing. It's a little bit of a bigger burden for us, because we only have two parks people that work, full time in our parks department. There's no way that they can sanitize and disinfect all of our equipment as many times a day as it needs to be done. And so they're getting prices for outside contractors to do that, and that would definitely be reimbursable through the CARES Act, we believe. So I mean, there again, we're wanting to work with the league, and if the other youth conference leagues are playing, and they're for instance, South Jordan, West Jordan are hosting those games on their fields, I just didn't want to be the only city that said no. But if you say that's what we're going to do, then that's what we'll do.
Would it be too late to put this on as an agenda item for our next city council meeting? Is that too late in the process?
No,
It'll be.
I'll put it on the 4th.
August 4th, yeah. I just mean, is it too close to when, if we were just all of a sudden to say no youth football, but now they've been actually contact practicing?
Yeah, they actually start, I think, the 1st of August is
Yeah.
when they start practicing.
I think it's worthy of a discussion by the council.
We're like I said, we're putting in the process of getting information put together. We'll put together a presentation for you on the 4th, and we'll discuss it. Be a discussion action item.
Okay. Sounds good.
That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and everybody for your good discussion points there. All right, we are just past 7 o'clock, so I want to welcome everybody that's listening in on YouTube or on our city website. And we want to begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. We'll ask Chief Mazurn to unfurl the beauty of our flag in his office, and we'll all stand and pledge allegiance to this flag. Are you there, Chief Mazurn? Or sorry, Chief, where is the chief?
Here. And I apologize, I do not have a flag in this conference room.
Oh,
Mayor Chief Thomas is not here today.
Chief Thomas is not here.
Yeah, he normally has the flag.
Well, let's stand and pledge allegiance, and then we'll set up a contingent in the future. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I have a statement that I am going to read first off here. This meeting will be an electronic meeting without a physical location pursuant to Utah Code 52-4-207, as amended in House Bill 5002. I, Mayor Robert Hale, as Chair of the Midvale City Council, hereby make the determination that conducting the meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based upon the fact that the city is unable to ensure compliance with the guidelines and public health protocols mandated by the state's current risk phase. Okay, Rory, would you call the roll, please?
Absolutely. Councilmember Robinson,
Here.
Gettle,
Here.
Brown,
Here.
Barry,
Here.
and Glover.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Chief Mazurn, are you presenting the Unified Police Report today then?
I didn't have any remarks prepared in general. Randy had to run out pretty quick, so I told him I'd just fill in for him, answer any questions that anyone has. I would like to mention something. I know that Mayor Hill read a letter, and there was a number of different items in that letter. And I'd like to, in conjunction with Chief Thomas, work on some issues, especially around the shared services and inviting at the appropriate time and place some of our council people to do something similar to what Matt Dahl did, is to come and look at those shared resources that you have and come kind of understand them better. It's one thing to try to explain it, but we look at it from a spreadsheet or a budget, but to come and actually look and understand, there's parts of it that I'd like to share with you guys so that you can see some of the things that aren't as visible, but that are really critical to your patrol folks and resources that they use to keep the city safe. And I think that's a really easily overlooked but important part of our department. So in the near future, like I said, obviously with COVID and some other things, you know, it creates some challenges, but most appropriate time, invite you guys here in the very near future to come look around. Anyone have any questions for me?
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to Chief Larson. May I remind everyone, if you're not speaking, just mute your sound system so that we don't get that rough sound coming through. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Everyone hear me okay? I have a new laptop and I wasn't sure how it was going to work. So anyway, here we go. Just a few really quick things, a COVID update. And this report, I apologize, was from the end of June. But of course, as everyone knows, we've seen quite a significant increase in the number of cases for COVID. The week ending May 30th, our daily average rate was 89 in the county and 181 in the state. By comparison, the week ending June 30th, the daily rate was 251 as compared to 89, and 520 in the state as compared to 181. I noticed the last couple of days it's dropped down a little bit, so I hope that downward trend continues. Of the 11,227 confirmed cases as of July 1st, 3,688 were within the UFA running district, with 7,539 out of that. So we were almost half. That's pretty significant. The highest number of active cases, and again, this was July 1st, in descending order for cities in our district, were Kearns with 185, Taylorsville 171, Mill Creek 144, Midville 115, and Magna 91. This is a good reminder to maintain hygiene practices and diligence in social distancing and following the recommended guidance from the CDC, Utah's Department of Health, and the Salt Lake County Health Department. I hope the last couple of days is indicative of a continued downward trend. We can only hope and pray for that. Of course, the July 4th fireworks, I talked about that in our last council meeting. We're preparing for the 24th holiday. Typically, the 24th, we see a lot less fireworks activity from the residential neighborhoods. With COVID, I mean, it's just hard to say. I really don't know what to predict this year. I understand we might get some rain tomorrow. I really hope so. That could really help. We sent out several safety information pieces to Laura to get out to the citizenry before the 24th. Your public works has been great working with us, getting sign up in the area of concern that Councilman 𝐏𝐮𝐥𝐬𝐜 mentioned. If there's some other streets, I think they mentioned that they might be able to get some more signs up. So just let me know. I talked to Captain Birmingham tonight, and he said there was some activity in Midvale, but probably about normal as other years. Just some concern down by the river bottoms there. And we certainly don't want to get anything going there. Wildland update, we've had quite a bit of activity with our wildland crews. They responded to the Traverse Fire in Lehigh at the end of June, the Knowles Fire on the Saratoga Springs on June 28th and 29th. Those were both pretty significant. They've also sent a hotshot crew to Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah so far this season. They've spent just a limited amount of downtime they've had doing fuels mitigation work up in the benches and some of our adjoining wildland areas here in the fire district in Salt Lake County. Engine 301 and 302, they were heavily involved in project work and mitigation. They were involved in several fires in Alberta, Traverse, Eagle Mountain. The engines have been to Moab and Oak City and are in Nevada currently. Squad 1, our fuels crew, had a productive season working on mitigation since April. So they've been hard at it trying to protect the wildland areas that we have here. And I know it doesn't really affect Midvale that much, but I think it just goes to show the significant amount of resources that are available to Midvale, whether it's heavy rescue, arson investigation, our medical teams and staff, and just the amount of vehicles that could respond in to Midvale should there be a significant event. So I'm really proud to be a member of this organization and the vast amount of resources we have to serve our citizens in the best way possible. A strategic plan update. The strategic plan work group has held several meetings to be in the process of developing the 2021 to 2024 strategic plan. The current one we have is coming up to the end of its life, and so we're reevaluating. We want to look at our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges, to totally analyze the organization and identification of stakeholders to engage in the process. We want to involve our cities, council members, mayors, business owners, citizens. We want to involve everyone to find out what we can do to better serve our community. The group's currently looking at dates in September for community outreach meetings and potential alternatives to address the COVID-19 concerns, which still may be around by then. I like to be an optimist and say they won't be, but we'll see. Recent promotions and job fillings. Daryl Kirby has filled a position for office prevention specialist in my office. He's working with our hazmat permit inspectors and other members in our office. He's already done some great things, really helping the operation to run smooth in our division. And I'm really happy to have him. Camry DeVoe was selected as the community outreach specialist out of 120 some applicants. She comes very well qualified and with a lot of experience, so she'll be able to really help with our community outreach and PR and maybe working with Laura. I'm sure Laura will get to know her. Rob Ayers was selected as the EMS captain, and Kurt Burge returned to operations. Captain Kurt Burge had served in EMS division, training your paramedics and your EMTs for quite a long time and making sure that their skills were where they need to be. And then Anthony Widdison was chosen to be the new Harriman liaison. That's just kind of a quick aerial overview of our activities in the last month. I just thought I'd present that. I hope I was brief enough. Like I've said before, I promise to be brief no matter how long it takes. Anyway, so
That's
anyway.
Good one.
Any questions for me?
Thanks for your help on the sign down here on Tuscany View. I appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, your Public Works, they jumped right on it. So anyway, great.
Thank you, Chief Larson.
Thank you.
Appreciate your updates every month or every 2 weeks. And it keeps us informed as to what's going on in the broader picture from the 10,000 foot level in that, and then the police also.
You know, Mayor?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think if it's okay with you, Kane, and the council, I would like maybe once a quarter to bring in one of our division chiefs from one of our other divisions to talk about the services they provide for Midvale. Our medical division, logistics division with the apparatus and grounds maintenance, heavy rescue. It might be good to really help everyone grasp a full picture of all the services that we do provide. So maybe I'll talk to Kane about that and see what we can work out.
They would be welcome.
Okay.
Thanks. All right, we'll now go to the public comment section, and I want to remind everyone that this is the portion of the agenda that allows any person to express ideas, concerns, comments, or issues. If you would like to comment on a public hearing item, you will be allotted time during the public hearing portion of the meeting. Please email your comments to Laura Magnus at LMAGNESS, that's lmagnus@midvale.com. When commenting, please limit your comments to 400 words, which is approximately 3 minutes of microphone time. Include your first and last name, include your city of residence, and include the name of the agenda item.
You're supposed to say this.
Staff only read into the record the equivalent of 3 minutes, so please be concise with your statements. Laura, it sounds like you want to say something there.
Yes, hi, Mayor. Thank you very much. I have the public comments. I just wanted to point out that the the place of residence, they don't have to list that. That's optional. It's not a requirement, but we would like for them to list it, but they don't have to.
Okay. All right, and you say there's no public comments at this time?
I do have 2 public comments. The
Okay.
first public comment is from Lorene Butler, and she states, I would like to suggest that members of the Canyon School Board come and address the issue of schools to house the developments that are being proposed. It may help the direction the city takes. Thank you, Lorene Butler. And then I have one more public comment from Wade Walker. Please open the pickleball courts at the city park. Right now, people need to relieve stress from the current conditions. One of the great ways to do that is to get outside and exercise. The risk of COVID exposure and transmission is very low in outdoor recreational activities, so there seems to be little risk to opening the pickleball courts. I understand the need for the playground to be closed due to commonly touched surfaces, but the pickleball courts are a completely different type of environment. People bring their own rackets and balls, and there are no commonly touched surfaces on the court. If the concern is proximity to other unrelated groups or individuals, you could close the middle court on each side to provide adequate separation between groups. You could also place signs on the courts emphasizing that people are using the courts at their own risk. I've previously heard that one of the concerns is that the bathrooms are still closed. I don't think that that should be an impediment to opening the courts. People use the park every day without the bathrooms being open, so this would be no different. I respectfully ask the city to open the pickleball courts as soon as possible. Thanks, Wade Walker. And those are the only 2 comments I have, Mayor.
Okay, I received a letter today that I'd like to share. It came from Grant and Charlene Pullen. Dear Mayor and City Council, during this most difficult pandemic, we find that living in Midvale is an amazing privilege. We recently drove through our city cemetery and wondered about the men and women who have cared for the area and how beautiful, clean, and trim the grounds were. Driving home, we appreciated the cleanliness and care of the city streets and the calm, peaceful atmosphere we enjoy. We appreciated the regular trash pickup, maintaining of all the city projects, the careful distribution of city funds, the fire department and the volunteers, and the emergency medical teams, and on and on. We are especially grateful at this time for the dedication, service, and bravery of our police officers who have come under such undeserved criticism. They have been at our beck and call for these 60+ years. We have appreciated their willingness to put their lives at risk daily for the benefit and safety of the citizens. We want them to know of our deep appreciation and thanks for a job always well done in the past and even now as they continue to serve the people at all costs. Having lived in Midvale City for most of our married life and having raised 5 children in this beloved community, we want all of you to know of our deep gratitude for your devotion to the citizens of Midvale, and especially to us, our family, and the Grant Street neighborhood. Please convey thank you to all those who make our lives as residents of Midvale City so protected, pleasant, and peaceful. Sincerely, the Pullens. That was a nice letter. Okay, with no more public comments, we'll move to council reports and begin with Councilman Sperry.
I have nothing tonight, Mayor.
Okay. We'll move next to Councilmember Robinson.
I have nothing tonight, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Glover.
Yeah, I just have a couple questions. I've had some calls about the postponement of the Planning Commission on some of the public hearings. What is our policy to re-notify people when they're going to be held? Do we do that, or what's happening there?
I can answer that one for you. When an item is tabled or continued because the meeting goes long, we put it on the next available agenda and we don't renotice those. It's basically, we in the meeting will say it will be held on the meeting on this date at this time, so we don't renotice it at that point.
Okay, because I've had several people concerned about that we're not noticing those, so I don't know if I understand the policy. I just don't know. They're not happy with it. Let's put it that way. And I guess the second question is I listened to the last planning commission for over 5 hours and never got to the one I was listening to, which I'm sure that's frustrating most of the citizens. Question, are we looking at policies to be able to make those meetings shorter? Because we read comments for hours on end.
We are both in planning commission, and in case the issue comes up in the city council meetings, we're looking at a couple different things. One of them is looking at the potential of making it so that people could provide a video input during the public comments. And then also we're looking at creating forms that people could fill out that would limit them to 300 or 400 words, which is about 3 minutes worth of reading. And then they could indicate if they just want their whether they're pro or con to be indicated, or if they want their whole comment read, or if they just want their comments put into the minutes. And we're hoping that through that, we'll be able to try to keep those down a little bit. We didn't have the time constraints the last time. And while we're very appreciative of the very thoughtful comments that people provided, some of them were very long. And the other thing is that we're going to move away from taking comments from social media because not all of them were the most fruitful, and some of them were hard to determine if they were actually comments on the item at hand or comments on the comments on the items at hand. And for those reasons, we're going to try to make those changes, and hopefully that will help shorten the amount of time of those meetings and allow us to get to all the items.
Thank you, because those were painful meetings, let me tell you.
Well, let's just, I agree with you, and I'm very appreciative of the work that staff went into to read all of those comments. And I don't want to make light of the comment that was made, but I do want to just point out that Alex had to read a comment that was commenting on how he was reading the comments. And, you know, so, I mean, it got a little meta as far as reading the comments went.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you looking into this and see if we can streamline it.
No problem.
Okay, Councilmember Brown, please.
Yeah, just a few things. I'd like to thank the staff. I've had a lot of questions lately between Lisa and the Little League football and Glenn on lights. You guys have been great at responding and at least giving me stuff to bring back to the citizens, which I think has been very helpful. I also would like to put forth maybe a resolution or something on masks. Like I said earlier, I keep getting emails on masks from some really stupid website called One Click Politics. I mean, the president now wears a mask. He pushed forth something on it. I kind of want to just end the conversation as much as we can that we support it as a city. It's BYU just did a study that it's the effectiveness is substantial. I think it would be good for the city to go forward with a position on these masks, and if that's just a resolution supporting the county or whatever. I don't know what the best solution is, but I'd like to know what the other council members think of that, just so we can kind of stop the conversation and stop us looking like we are sort of indecisive about something that shouldn't be political, but somehow is become political. So, that's all I have, and we can discuss it later or whatever, but I'd like to consider that, coming up soon.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Councilmember Gettle.
Thanks, Mayor. I wanted to just say thanks to Glenn and his folks. I thank Chief Larson for helping out with the sign over here on Tuscany View. So I wanted to thank Glenn and his folks for putting it out here. I didn't actually realize until I walked past it how absolutely massive those signs are. So I have more appreciation for what went into putting it there. So thank you and your folks. I did also want to address Wade Walker's comments about the pickleball courts. I think that Wade is correct. And I think that we could probably think about opening the pickleball courts at our city park. I do think for all of the reasons that he mentioned, which are correct, seemingly from the evidence that's out there, it does seem to be a very low chance of transmission using the pickleball courts. And I've never seen the pickleball courts where they're back to back to back to back being used anyway. So maybe that is something we could do and have a very kind of public announcement that we're opening them. I think that would be, good for folks to see and have something to do if they are into pickleball. The other thing I wanted to mention, Councilmember Glover spoke about the Planning Commission. I would definitely like to echo what he said about it as the council member who was appointed to, I don't actually know what my responsibility is other than to watch the meetings. They're getting out of hand, of course. Councilmember Glover was correct in that. Not just in the length of the meetings. And no, I definitely don't want Alex or anyone, Chairman Smallwood, like no one's doing anything wrong in these meetings. I don't think. It's just there's a confluence of events that are happening that are making the meetings long. There are issues that people care deeply about, which aren't that, some planning commission meetings go on and we don't even know about them because nothing controversial is coming up. We have a lot of things happening at once that are bringing a lot of people out and a lot of people are commenting. But I will say one of my disappointments with the Planning Commission is there's been some, I don't know, I won't say animosity, but there really seems to be a debate amongst the Planning Commission members themselves as to what should be allowable as far as the conditional use permits go. And I find that to be a little concerning because we're always told that the conditional use permits are like, it is or it isn't, it's not, it shouldn't be an issue of the chairman breaking a tie twice in the last meeting on a conditional use permit. That would be like, the mayor breaking a tie on a motion to adjourn for our city council meeting. To me, it shouldn't necessarily create a 2-2 controversy of the Planning Commission as much as it does. So I don't, that, yes, there were a lot of comments, and I think we can stop, hey, is anyone on YouTube right now who wants to make a comment? Like when we have our meetings in person, we don't go out into the hallway of City Hall and ask, hey, is anyone out here want to make a comment? Like, no, you have there's a process to make a public comment. And if you don't follow that process, unfortunately, we tried. So I think we can limit those public comments to people who have properly submitted their public comments to Laura or whoever is the point of contact. And then during the public comment section, have a very specific policy in place too. Like if you're here for the public hearing, now's your time to make a comment and here's how to do it. So, that's something I know, Matt, you said you're working on that. That would be great. But again, my other concern, besides that, is that we're getting some, I would say that it's very political conversation on the planning commission between the commissioners. And as far as those conditional use permits, I think that should be a very rare, if ever, occurrence. So I think we should probably keep our eye on that. And if there's education that needs to be done on, I know we have a lot of new planning commission members. If there's some education that we need to do for those members, I think we should do it sooner than later.
Dustin, what do you mean by political?
Well, as I said, like a conditional use permit shouldn't be, it's basically, like, as I said, it would be like, us arguing whether we should adjourn a meeting or not. That shouldn't be something the mayor should have to break a tie on. Chair Smallwood had to break a 2-2 tie on 2 conditional use permits at last meeting. And he broke another tie on a rezone. And that's understandable. That's a little more understandable. But the conditional use permits, as far as I'm concerned, I might be the only, I don't know. What do you think, Brian? They shouldn't necessarily create political controversy amongst the commissioners.
A rezone, I understand. The other ones I don't. I thought it was something else when you said political. I didn't know if they were going on tangents or something that.
Well, and I don't want to criticize anyone on the planning commission. I'm certainly not going to call anyone out by name.
Right. That's fair.
There is that, there is that conversation happening. A very, not. There's a conversation, and I invite any of you can watch.
Yeah. I guess a better way to do this so it doesn't put you in a weird spot, Dustin or Councilman Gettle, is can you tell me like maybe one of the more egregious days and I'll just go watch it?
Okay. Well, last meeting.
Last meeting. Councilman Glover's laughing. So
every action item last meeting. Watch it.
Hey, Dustin, I don't want to break in your time or anything, but the conditional use, the thing that they need to understand though is it is conditional use, and they do have some authority to be able to say you have to have more parking, or you have to have some things that help mitigate some of the problems that could come with that project. So they do have some ability to make some changes. If there was no ability, it wouldn't be a conditional use. So they need to understand they have some power here.
That's true. But I think at the end of the day, once, if a commissioner wants to add a condition and it either passes or fails, then, I don't necessarily think that it's proper for them to vote no on the conditional use permit that has properly been debated and either those additional conditions that they wanted have passed or failed.
Yeah, and I guess that's my concern, is to make sure that they are considering conditions and having those discussions, and then they vote.
Yeah.
So, but it's just
those,
like you, we can always vote no, it's our privilege, our opportunity to do that. We might not be right, but we can still vote no.
Yeah, and I think that we have a more, we have a more political role in the process than the planning commission should. So I don't think that they should be necessarily making those political calls.
Well, thank you. Just as an observation.
Yeah. And sorry that I went, well, we don't have a set time, but I went over more than I normally do. Sorry about that. That's it for me. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Begetto. My report is pretty brief. In today's UFSA meeting, it was announced that they have hired a consulting company, and they begun reaching out to architects for the, I believe it's 4 fire stations, including 125 in Midvale. Budget set, and the bond companies are being contacted, and we will have some information in about 90 days. So somewhere in October, we may have some firm information on the timing for 125 construction. We look forward to that. And we also were presented the software program called Dark Horse that the UFA has hired to geographically spot where needs are, where travel time, what travel time is, where stations are, where they could locate stations to reduce response time. I think Chief Larson could add a little bit on this, but we're going to have the most technologically driven decision-making process for future fire stations than anything we've ever seen before. And we look forward to the discussion on Midvale's potential move over to the old City Hall site on Center Street, or they may pick someplace else that would get our fire trucks a minute earlier to where there are more problems typically, historically. And we'll have to see how this all shakes out before the end of the year. Chief Larson, would you like to add anything there?
No, Mayor, I think you covered it all really well. I think that this is really going to help overall for the entire fire district. We can plug all the data in from dispatch and from another program we have called Intera. And when we're looking at building a new station or replacing one, it will geographically locate that station in the best possible place as far as response times, number of calls, and all of that. It just automatically does that information for us. We no longer have to spend hours and hours and hours poring over data, days and weeks and months to try and figure out where the best location would be. This will just do it right off the bat. It will also provide our fire crews with a list of target hazards. In other words, those businesses in Midvale that present a significant fire hazard, environmental hazard, or life safety hazard, or just life loss hazard. And as they're responding, it can provide them with information regarding that facility so they can respond in the most appropriate manner. We're also working on software for inspections and permits, pre-plans, which we may be able to, Mayor, as you have asked for in the past, may be able to, if citizens want to post information that may be helpful for our responding crews, such as health concerns or access or some of those, we may have ability to do those kind of things. So Chief Peterson, his leadership, he's moving us in the right direction, getting us digitally updated for the modern times, and I think it's going to be a good thing.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that addition. That concludes my report. So City Manager Kane Loader.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll be brief. As I told the City Council earlier, we've been discussing the facilities, our recreational facilities, and we are moving ahead with opening up pickleball courts. Public Works is working on that. They should be open within the next week. We're also going to open the basketball courts down in Riverwalk, and then we will bring back to the council a proposal or some ideas of possibly opening other facilities on the August 4th meeting. Update a little bit on VEC. We have our first employee that tested positive for COVID-19. They're quarantined so far. Now, the other employees have not been affected by it, but they're watching it very closely as it can spread very easily in the close quarters that the VEC employees work in. So we're going to watch that very closely. An update on the CAD system, switching everything over to Versaterm. We understand that all of the fire EMS will be switched over by the end of September this year, and then they will start working on the different police agencies. I believe they're going to start with Murray, and anticipate that all of the police agencies will be converted by the end of spring, first part of summer next year, and that will complete about a $5.3 million project to get all of the Salt Lake County emergency services on the same CAD system. So that's a huge undertaking that we've had. We've been working on it for years, but it's finally coming to a culmination, and we're going to see the end of that hopefully by the beginning of summer next year. Let's see, I'm going to cut it off there, turn some time over to Laura to talk about an event that's coming up. So turn it over to Laura.
Thank you, Kane. Before I start talking about the event, I just wanted to add a little bit to what Chief Larson mentioned about the fireworks communications. I wanted to let you know that I've created a page on our website that's dedicated primarily to fireworks, safety regulations, safety tips, and the interactive map of restricted areas. And we've also included UFA's safety message on that website. There's a banner on our homepage, a scrolling banner that will take people to that website. And I've also shared that information on all of our social media. And I will continue to do that throughout the week, encouraging safety and making sure people follow the restricted area, the guidelines that we have. So the event that I wanted to talk about is the Rolling Car Show that we are hosting with Cottonwood Heights on Saturday, August 22nd. You'll start seeing our communications campaign out there probably later this week or early next week. And it is going to take place, the cars start rolling in Cottonwood Heights at about 6 p.m. and will transfer over to Midvale at 7 p.m. and it ends around 8 p.m. So the purpose of this car show is to have about 75 to 100 cars drive throughout Midvale, drive throughout Cottonwood Heights. We're trying to go into as many neighborhoods as we can in that time frame. We have to be careful of some neighborhoods that have a lot of dips because the hot rods and cars can't make it through the dips. And the goal is for people to be able to see the cars coming through their neighborhoods, or they could go to a safe location and watch the cars drive by as long as they're practicing social safe distancing. And we are advertising the information on both of our social media platforms, both Cottonwood Heights and Midvale. Cottonwood Heights has a Reagan electronic billboard that is located right on the border of Midvale and Cottonwood Heights, and they will put the ad on that billboard. And we're not going to be giving out awards, but we're going to be giving the car drivers like little snack kits, little fun little baggies. And we're real excited because the goal is just to bring cheer to our communities, and the fact that we're partnering together on this event is real exciting. We are working with both of our local police departments. Chief Thomas has already spoken with their assistant chief, and we'll be working closely to make sure that the cars follow the rules of the road. It's not going to be like a parade where they're throwing candy out or anything. They will drive slow, but not too slow to impede traffic. And we're going to make sure we make a lot of like right-hand turns, try not to cross as many major streets, and avoiding 7200 except for the very end of the show, which will probably end up over at Topgolf. We're still working on the route, the map, but we'll have that posted probably by the end of next week. But we just wanted to give you a heads up about it so that you know about it. And I'll make sure and send the flyers to all of your emails as soon as it's finalized. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What day is it, Laura? Sorry, I missed that part.
No worries. Saturday, August 22nd. It starts
Okay.
at 6 p.m. in Cottonwood Heights and 7 p.m. in Midvale.
Cool.
Thank you, King.
Thanks, Laura. I forgot to remind council that if you haven't gone in to see Sherry upstairs or in the administration about the coats that the Boys Association are buying out of this year's TARP funds, please go up. They have in the conference room next to where the administration, you come into administration, they have sample coats of different varieties and different sizes. So please go in and try a coat on and tell her which coat that you would like to order so we can get that order placed on those coats. Mayor, that concludes my report. Matt, did you have anything?
No, I don't have anything to add tonight.
That concludes City Manager's report, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Kane. And council, you'll really appreciate the warmth of those coats in the middle of July. You'll stay warm in those coats, no matter what time of the year you put them on. Okay, we will now move to department report, community development and RDA with Nate Rockwood. So Nate, take it away.
Hey, thanks. So I've got just a quick few items here. Starting with the RDA, just updating you, the RDA staff has been working hard. We've completed the draft Main Street budget, the fiscal impact study, the economic impact study, and the community impact study, which are all parts of the CDA for the Main Street. And so those drafts are all in internal review. And then once those reviews are completed, we'll bring that back to the RDA board and then to the other entities that would participate in that tax increment finance. So we're looking forward to moving forward with the Main Street. So a lot of good work has been done there. Just from an engineering standpoint, we wanted to make sure you're aware that 𝐏𝐮𝐥𝐬 Construction will be in the area from now through late fall, and they're continuing to install Utopia lines. So if you see them around. A question came up several council meetings ago about the intersection of Roosevelt and Altaview, and if there was a possibility that stop signs that face Altaview could maybe be changed so they face Roosevelt. The city engineer went and looked at that intersection, made the determination that with Roosevelt Street being a main road between Center and Wasatch, that it should remain the through street with no stops. And so
it's a residential road that's 25 miles an hour with homes. The exact reason he thinks is why it should be should have a stop sign. We shouldn't consider a main road of 25 miles an hour for homes something that should have that free flow of traffic. I mean, that's the exact reason we should have a stop sign there.
Okay. So right now he's recommending that it stays the way that it is, but if you would like, or if council would like him to come back and explain that further, we can have him do that.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't reference a main road, then yes, he can explain a different reason, because that is not, I mean, the entire reason is public safety. There's no lines painted on that road. There's a ton of cars parked on it from the those townhomes, at this point. So there's a lot of times it's a one-lane road between Altaview and Center. So that it's borderline dangerous as it is where people are coming fast. So yeah, I would like to push back on that. because we don't want to consider it a main road. We want to consider it a safe road and push people towards state, or, you know, it's a shortcut through a neighborhood is what that is, that we don't want to continue down. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. I'll bring it up with Keith and we'll let him work on
Thank
an
you.
explanation. Okay. Just an update, another update. The path from Jordan River up to the track station at Gardner Village is being started to be worked on. So that's a West Jordan project. They're starting work on that. And then if anyone's noticed, they did put down some new boards on that bridge so that it's not quite the safety hazard that it was. But that bridge is still scheduled to be replaced later this fall. But those steps have been taken. Only other item is we appreciate council working with us last week or 2 weeks ago in the study session on the single family residential zones, and finishing that part by filling out the study questionnaire. And I know there was a couple of hiccups in the beginning on getting that little survey to work right, but it is working right now. So for the few that haven't taken it, if you can take that, that would be great. And then we will come back with the next part of that study of what to do with single family zones. That is all of the updates that I have for now.
And thank you, Nate. Appreciate that. Administrative Services, Kyle Marr, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me just share my screen. So tonight I want to do things a little differently. So instead of just presenting the statistics and some of the department highlights from admin services, I wanted to go through the money we received through the CARES Act and what our current plans with that, what those funds are. And I did put this in the packet because I did go through some of the federal and state programs, and there's quite a lengthy list. So we'll probably just breeze over those, but they are available in the packet, which is also available online if any residents are interested. Just as a brief summary, the CARES Act was part of the $150 billion coronavirus relief fund that the federal government enacted on March 27th. For the state of Utah, the state, Utah County, and Salt Lake County received direct distributions from the federal government. Salt Lake County received their funds on April 23rd. From there, the county did disperse to us about $994,000 on June 30th, and that was based off of our population. This is also where it gets tricky with these funds is the grant funds must only be used to cover expenses that are necessary expenditures due to the public health emergency, were not accounted for in the budget as of March 27th and were incurred from March 2020 to December 2020. That is the extent of the guidance, the official guidance we were given is those three items. Some restrictions that have been outlined is we can't use these funds as a government revenue replacement. So we can't use these funds to replace tax dollars we've lost. We also cannot provide grants to residents to pay their water bills because that's considered a revenue replacement for us. We cannot use it for an expenditure where a grantee, sub-grantee, or a sub-recipient receives funding from Salt Lake County. That's specifically in our agreement with the county. They also, we cannot grant the money or use the money for any losses or expenses that are reimbursed under any other federal, state, or private program. With the county, we do have to spend the funds by October 1st. However, they will allow grant extensions. I've spoken with the county a little bit already, and they say if you have a project in process on this October 1st date, most likely they would grant an extension to continue. Any unexpended grants or anything they don't provide an extension for us to be returned to the county by October 7th. We have to adhere to any current or future federal or county guidance. We'll go through the challenges. One of the big challenges is we're continually getting updates on what these funds can be used for, so it's been a little challenging. And if the city receives funding from other sources with the same purpose, we must return the original funds to the county. So this was put in case, as you know, the federal government's talking about another stimulus package. If we receive a direct stimulus from the federal government or some other source, we would have to return this original amount to the county. The next few slides are just, I tried as my best to outline what the current programs are that are funded using CARES Act between the federal, state, and county levels. I can't guarantee this is an exhaustive list. It was my best attempt. Some of these you've heard, such as the Paycheck Protection Program that's been in the news quite a bit. There's a number of tax credits that the IRS is offering in deferments. The state has recently, within the past couple weeks, rolled out some of their own programs through 𝐏𝐿. Of note, there's a commercial rental assistance program. A new one is a PPE support grant program to help businesses acquire PPE and reconfigure for social distancing. There was a cultural assistance grant program that the Division of Arts and Museums has introduced, but that is only for organizations over 5 million. They are planning on rolling out another program for entities under 5 million, but that hasn't been released yet. And the main county program is they are doing small business impact grants, grants up to 35,000, and they are trying to target small businesses for those. So as a staff, we have brainstormed what we can use these funds for, and we've put them into 3 categories. These level 1 projects are ones that we've either already started because we needed to, or they're definitely CARES Act eligible, and the likelihood of another program replacing them is quite low. So the main one is PPE and sanitation expenses. We've spent overall about $6,000. So right now we've set this budget at $31,200. However, that may change if we end up opening playgrounds up and other park amenities that will need additional cleaning. We haven't budgeted that yet. Unified Fire and Unified Police aren't eligible from disbursements either through federal, state, or county levels. So they are looking to us to help offset their COVID-19 costs. The UFA was a number that we did, expense estimate we did get from their CFO. UPD is still working on their estimate. I came up with a number based on what was presented in a board meeting and then projecting that out and then taking our member cost of that. We are also in the process of purchasing technology to work remotely. One of the challenges we've had once City Hall closed down was we have a number of positions that have desktop computers instead of laptops. And I do have to give my hats off to IT because they definitely were thinking quick on their feet on how we could get those positions to be able to work from home. We are working on replacing those desktops with laptops. So if we do have to shut City Hall down again in the future, and then also for continued teleworking, that technology to do that. And that also includes docking stations and monitors employees need at home to do their jobs. The one we talked about last week is the council chamber upgrades to the city council chambers to allow remote meetings and to allow better public comment, and also to allow having people in the anchor location and online. As you probably remember from our first meeting, trying to have somebody in the City Hall council chambers while some of us were virtual was definitely not ideal, and it would create a number of issues. So those are level 1 projects that we are in process on. Level 2 projects are ones we have vetted out and we believe they meet the CARES Act requirements, and they, on a staff level, have a high priority to us. One of the main ones is a phone system replacement or upgrade. One of the issues we have with the current phone system is we aren't able to forward those main lines out to a home or to somewhere off-site. So when the City Hall was shut down, we did have to have somebody in City Hall to answer the phone because we didn't have a good way of forwarding it. So the IT department is looking at possible phone system changes. There is an option that we are looking at that is significantly cheaper than that 50,000. We might be able to just upgrade our current phone system and have the ability to route that phone remotely. And then also there's some good features on using what's called a soft phone that's connected to your computer. And there's also possibilities of actually taking your physical desktop phone home and hooking it in. Another one which you probably heard me talk about quite a bit while we were shut down is a bill payment system upgrade. We had a number of issues with our current bill payment system, and it was down a number of weeks. And it was definitely a headache for both us as staff and then our residents when we are encouraging them to make their payments remotely and they're unable to because the website's down. Another one is an HRIS system. So this would move our performance management, remote training, online recruiting, and applications online. One of the challenges is with everything being shut down, we need to move to more remote training since people can't go to physical locations to train. And then automating the grammar redaction, software process to make that remote and being able to be done remotely easier. The level 3 projects, they're ones that we've brainstormed as staff, but we need to do more research on, and we are actively doing more research on them. The first one would be, we've been looking at a community development software solution. As Nate can probably attest to, we had many challenges when City Hall was shut down, and community development and IT were quick on their feet and got processes in place so people could submit things remotely. However, it's really not a true remote virtual situation. Ideally, everything could be submitted online. Applicants would be able to track their progress online. You'd be able to make payments online. And we definitely have some issues with our current setup there. One of the challenges is we do have to have that money spent at the latest by December 30th. As many of you have done software updates or software implementations, they take quite a bit of time. So we're trying to figure out what we could get done by December, by the end of December. The Corps made a request for plea and abeyance software. And you'll notice that amount of 100,000 is quite high. One of the issues is we haven't been able to find an off-the-shelf product solution. The one city we are aware of in Utah that has plea and abeyance software that you're able to do it online was a product that they did in-house. It's a larger city. So that one we definitely need to vet more thoroughly to determine if that's even a possibility at this point. Another great idea we had was for masks and hand sanitizer for Midvale businesses. That one got moved into the need more researches because the state has launched their own PPE program for reimbursement. So it's a matter of if we could create a program that wouldn't duplicate the states, and then also if they do run out of money fairly quickly at the state program, there might be a possibility we could pick that up for Midvale residents. And then the remainder of the funds would be economic development projects, which we are still vetting out. It's especially challenging with the state still coming out with programs. And then we're still getting guidance from the county on when their funds might be extinguished from their grant program. So we are still working on that. We're still in the process of contacting the county and see what we can do that they feel would be a good use of their funds and we're not duplicating another program. So some of the challenges we're facing, I've gone through a lot of these, but the main one is we've gotten very limited guidance on fund usage. So we had those 3 criterias, and then every few weeks, the Department of Treasury has been updating a frequently asked questions. So different localities are submitting questions to the Department of Treasury and they're picking ones to answer. And that's how we're basically getting guidance on what can and can't be spent. Another challenge, as you know, is they are discussing a second round of stimulus now, which may or may not change how we can use these existing CARES funds or if they need to go back to the county. I had also mentioned that a program can't duplicate a current federal, state, or county program. we have to have the funds spent, or at least a good idea of funds in process of being spent by October 1st. And then for business grants in particular, I did put, we currently aren't set up to administer grants. We're great at taking grants and following grant requirements. However, cities, especially cities our size, usually aren't the ones administering grants. So we don't have that infrastructure in place. The state has 𝐏𝐬𝐜 and a few other divisions that have grants, so they were able to use that existing grant infrastructure. So we'll need to set that up too. So that's all I had, but I just wanted to give you an update, our thoughts and where we're at with those CARES Act funds.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Hey, Kyle.
Yes.
The only concern I have is on these funds is the ongoing expenses. We really need to watch those very carefully. If we spend this money and we have ongoing expenses every year from it, we need to make sure that we understand what those are before we okay them.
Absolutely, and that's why on those tables I had an ongoing expense. So that's something, especially as the budget person, I worry about is, are we committing ourselves to future expense?
So, I mean, if we do any of those, we need the city council to approve that.
Sure, that's understandable.
Not all of it, we probably should, but those specifically.
Right, there's a couple things on that. So one is this will need to come back through as a budget amendment. Most likely it will be with the tentative budget when it's passed in August, because I can't do budget amendments yet since we don't have a formal budget passed. And then some of the larger items we definitely would want city council buy-in on before we roll them out.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions for Kyle? Good presentation, Kyle. We'll now move to a public hearing. Entertain a motion to open the public hearings.
I motion we open a public hearing, Mayor.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to open the public hearings. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Our first public hearing is to consider a proposed text amendment to modify development standards in the Jordan Bluffs sub-areas 1, 2, and 3. Alec, I see you're up on this one.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So this is the first of 5 things we've got tonight, all eventually related to that Zions project over there on Jordan Bluffs. So we talked in some detail about the proposed text amendment here in the last meeting in our discussion. So I'll just briefly go over what it's proposing, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that the council might have. So when we first started hearing and talking about the Zions project, it became apparent that there were going to be some of the ordinance provisions adopted in last year when we first put together this ordinance for this area that were going to need to be tweaked in order for Zions to really work over there. Probably the most significant one is reconfiguring the road network and the pod map layout for the overall Jordan Bluffs property. So that's proposed in the first and second sections here. We did propose as part of that some modifications to setbacks and landscaping requirements that would ultimately result in a more urban style development in the center of Jordan Bluffs for the office and mixed use sorts of uses, and then some supporting residential uses on the periphery. We're proposing some changes to parking and road dimensions to better fit that vision as well, and then adding some on-street and off-street loading requirements, tweaking some building heights, and then modifying some parking garage standards, all in that effort of achieving that more urban vision in the long run for that project. One of the other big changes that comes out of this is addressed more in the master development agreement that we'll talk about in a few minutes, which is the relocation of the central linear park. In the original proposal, it ran roughly down the center of Jordan Bluffs, and now it's been relocated over to the west edge at the top of the slope, right above the Jordan River. The Gardner has spent some time talking to each of the council members about that proposal and the justifications for it, and staff agrees that that's an improvement over the original design. Let's see. So we talked about this previously, and I don't recall there being a whole lot of questions in the first go around. So like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have here. In the vein of that ongoing responsibility requirement that we just talked about for some of the budget items, I will point out that the text amendment does result in more road requirements in the long run, more public road requirements in the long run, that is, than we had in the original text. We haven't done any sort of detailed analysis about what that looks like, but we would expect that in the future, when Jordan Bluffs is fully built out, that we will see some need for ongoing maintenance for those, as well as the park, which was already in place in that development agreement and prior ordinance. Okay, that's all I have for you.
Okay, members of the council have questions for Alex on this ordinance? Okay, hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I do have the.
We do have open it up for public comment. So is there any comment from the public? Laura?
I do not have any public comments, Mayor.
Okay.
I don't have any either, but we do have Mark Murdoch here from Gardner, as well as Jennifer Smith from Zions and some other folks from WRNS, if the council has any questions that they can answer as well.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd be happy to answer anything. Thanks, Mayor.
Hey, on the roads, I can't remember which section this was. I read all this stuff and I can't remember which is where, but in the our engineering had something to say they were concerned about the roads. I think I read something.
Yes.
Can you tell me what they're talking about?
So the original ordinance that we adopted established minimum separation requirements for road access points that were somewhat arbitrary and somewhat based on the expected traffic on each road. After we adopted those standards and the Zions project came in and we started seeing this new proposal for Jordan Bluffs, the city engineer mentioned that those arbitrary numbers that we had put into place really limited his ability to respond to development proposals with separation requirements. And so what we proposed in this text amendment is to remove the requirement, the minimum requirement that is in the zoning ordinance, make them a recommendation instead, and then defer to the city engineer to ensure that the overall traffic patterns will still function well in the long run. So it's transferring that responsibility out of the zoning ordinance and into engineering standards.
Okay, that helps there. I guess the other questions I have are to make sure that in this agreement that there is public parking for our parks and these parking structures, that's going to be addressed. And also the amount of parking. If we really, my big concern with the projects we've had before is there still was never enough parking. We're always having problems parking in the wintertime, and it's just, parking has been a problem. I just want to make sure that we really are addressing these. And I understand the concept of having tracks and everything close so we don't need as much parking, but so far in these other developments, it hasn't really panned out that way. So I want to make sure that at least we're considering this, and the developer, Mark, you really feel like you're going to have enough parking for all of this.
Yeah, we do have in both the zoning ordinance and the master development agreement currently a requirement for public parking for the park. So that isn't changing, and it's required for each pod that's adjacent to the park. So basically every project that comes in will be required to provide some level of public parking.
And does it say how much parking, or is it just they will provide?
There's not a minimum requirement. We had originally talked about doing that in the early drafts of the zoning ordinance, and it fell out because it was going to be somewhat arbitrary, and we didn't have a good justification for why we would require a certain number of stalls. So we did write in, the community development director determines the number of stalls that are required for the park. So we do have some ability there to require a certain number, but we are also going to try and respond to the amenities in the park adjacent to each pod, the development that's happening in the pod, so that we can try and put the parking in good places without creating a unnecessary burden on the developer side.
Isn't the city eventually taking over the maintenance of this park?
Yes. In fact, as each section is completed, the city is responsible for adopting them.
But each pod could put in one parking spot.
Well, we'll have to set a minimum as part of the large scale master plan review process. So each one will go through that. It'll have a development agreement. So each pod that's adjacent to the park will have an opportunity for the council to comment on the number of stalls that are required. And we'll have to provide some justification in our review at the staff level as to why that works. We're not interested in shortchanging parking for the park any more than the council is. We want to make sure that it's available for everybody to use as whenever we want to let them use it. So we're going to try and do what we can.
And we're on the same boat. We're on the same boat too. We feel the same way.
Thanks, Mark. I was just about to ask you, so just you can read my mind, I feel like now.
I guess those were my main concerns.
Brian and Jennifer, do you have any additional comments you'd like to make?
Thank you. This is Jennifer Smith, and I don't have any additional comments. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't either. Thank you,
All
Mayor
right.
Hale.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right.
I would like to say one more thing. Thanks Mark and everybody for spending the time and explaining the development. That did help a lot.
Absolutely. We are more than happy to do it. So thank you for taking your time. We sure appreciate it.
And since there weren't any public comments on this item, does the council have any further questions or comments on this action item? And if you don't, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I did just want to make one real quick comment. Right now, I've noticed the bicycle lanes that are in just on the Bingham Junction extension. They seem pretty narrow to me. Now, I'm not the world's most for whatever. I don't bike a whole lot, is what I'm trying to say. But those lanes to me seem a little narrow. So I'm just wondering, am I making that up in my head, or is that something that was just put in kind of quickly so that they would be there and are going to be revisited later?
So I can answer that question for you. They are narrow, and it was done somewhat unintentionally. There's been a shift in what's considered good bike lane design over the years. When bike lanes first started being implemented, there wasn't any thought given really to where the bike lane was placed. So it was essentially measured from the curb face and ended up being, maybe 4, maybe 5, maybe 6 feet wide, depending on where you're at, but starting at the curb. When we did our ordinance standards for sub-area 4, which is where the Bingham Junction extension design width comes into play, we ended up somewhat accidentally also measuring it from the curb face. So we have a foot or a foot and a half of bike lane in the gutter and the remainder on the road. That's not good design. So in this version where we have these new road standards, we made sure to keep the bike lanes out of the gutter entirely. So these ones will be better. When it comes to revisiting Bingham Junction, that's kind of hard because the road is meant for more vehicle traffic. And if we narrow the lanes, then we end up potentially creating some cascading impacts on the ability for vehicles to move through there.
Okay.
If it becomes a more popular bike route, then that'll definitely be necessary. And we'll actually be bringing an active transportation plan back to the council later this year that has some proposals in there for improvements like on Bingham Junction. So we can talk more about it there too.
Yeah, for sure. Because most people are going to, hopefully anyway, go from their apartment, their condo, townhouse, use the main roads there sparingly to get to the Jordan River Trail. So yeah, I was hoping that, well, one, I was hoping that the lanes weren't too narrow. Maybe I was just envisioning that, but just making sure as we build out even more streets that are connected to living space, that they're maybe a little bit wider.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I think so. Right now we're all right.
Okay, is there a motion on this someone would like to make?
Move that we close
Mayor,
the
I move
hearing.
that we adopt ordinance number 2020-0-09, amending Title 17 of the Midvale City Municipal Code to modify development standards in the JBL subareas 1 through 3 zone.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions on this motion?
Did we close the public hearing?
I made, that's the motion I made. So,
Rory, do we have to do that first, or can we do this motion of Heidi's?
I think we could go ahead and do it since we don't have any public comment. Let's finish this one and then we can do the other one.
Okay. Well, I'll second both of them. I don't know which one you were talking about.
All right,
Yeah.
go ahead, Rory.
Okay. Councilmember Sperry.
Aye.
Glover.
Aye.
Robinson.
Aye.
Brown.
Yes.
And Gettle.
yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and do a motion to close the public hearing.
Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to close the public hearing on item A. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed, say no. All right, that public hearing is closed. Now we'll ask for an opening of a public hearing on item B to consider preliminary subdivision plat or 2-lot subdivision located at approximately 7860 South Bingham Junction Boulevard. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that we enter a public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to open another public hearing. All in favor of this motion, say aye.
Yes.
Any,
Aye.
Aye.
that sounded like an aye, not a no. Okay. We are in a public hearing then. Again, Alex, if you'd help us through this.
Gladly. This time I will share a screen really quick. Are you seeing my plat?
Yes.
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 Okay, excellent. So this request is for a subdivision amendment for Jordan Bluffs. It's intended to revise the boundary of the Zions parcel and reconfigure the location of the first of the public streets on Jordan Bluffs, that binary way segment, and will eventually connect to the rest of the proposed street network in that text amendment we just went through as future developments happen. So this is, it's a pretty basic subdivision. I mean, we're going from what now is currently 2 lots and some additional parcels to 2 lots and a road. There isn't really anything in the zoning ordinance that cares about this subdivision, so I'll just point out a couple of things that we want to make sure we address as we move forward. The Planning Commission did recommend approval on this one with a list of conditions. Many of them have been satisfied, like notes on the plats and things. So the last few things to really be aware of on this one is it's a preliminary plat because there is a proposal for a public road. So we'll come back with a final plat in the future. The final plat does have to wait to be recorded until some work is finished on the north slope of Jordan Bluffs, because the plat proposes a new boundary that overlaps the slope, and Gardner is required to retain ownership of the slope area. So basically they can't record the plat and transfer that to Zions until the slope work is done and they've moved the slope. But we can still go through this process and get them ready to record before that happens. This will require the council to finish the vacation that we had a public hearing about in the last meeting, and that is on the agenda for tonight. I've got an ordinance for you to consider. So in the recommendation, we do list some recommended conditions that refer to the vacation, refer to the timing on the final plat, and then refer to some basic requirements with subdivisions like finish the subdivision with the final plat, provide courtesy notices to local utility companies, duty to serve letters, etc. So again, pretty basic. we've gone through this one already once, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Alex on this? We've also again have Mark here if you have any detailed questions for him. Okay, hearing none. Are there any public comments on this item? Laura or Alex?
I do not have any public comments on this item, Mayor.
Neither do I.
Okay, Ben, would you like
Yes,
to make,
Mayor.
would you like to make any comments part of the presentation?
No, Alex just did a great job. We're happy staff for the council.
Okay. Hearing no comments, entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Any comments or questions on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, public hearing's closed. Who would like to offer the motion on this?
Mayor, based on compliance with the requirements of the Midvale City Municipal Code demonstrated in the application or addressed by conditions of approval, I move that we approve the preliminary subdivision plat for the Jordan Bluffs Lot 201A, second amended subdivision with the following conditions of approval. 1, this approval is contingent on vacation of Binary Way and Ivy Drive west of Bingham Junction Boulevard. 2, the applicant shall prepare a final subdivision plat to be reviewed and approved by the city engineer, fire marshal, and city council. 3, the applicant shall provide evidence that courtesy notices have been sent to Dominion Energy, Rocky Mountain Power, Xfinity, Utopia, and CenturyLink regarding the utility easements on the subdivision plat prior to the final approval. 4, prior to recording the final subdivision plat, the applicant shall A, obtain duty to serve letters for water and service and sewer service, and B, complete the grading work on the north cap slope as required by ordinance and agreement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this motion? Hearing none. Rory, would you ask the questions, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Sperry.
Aye.
Glover,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
and Gettle.
Yes.
Thank you. Our next item is the consent agenda of the minutes for July 7th.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mark.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda for July 7th minutes. Any questions or comments on that motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yep.
We need
Rory,
roll-
do you want to ask questions on that one? I'm sorry.
No problem. Councilmember Glover,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
and Sperry.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a set of action items. First is to consider resolution 2020 R31 approving the proposed First Amendment to the amended and restated master development agreement for Jordan Bluffs. Alex?
Yes. So this is the second half of that text amendment. And we also talked about this one, and we've made a little more progress than we had last time. So this proposes some changes to the amenities, the park specifically, the phasing, some infrastructure improvements in the exhibits in the development agreement. Really briefly, as I mentioned in the text amendment, we do have that revision to the central linear park, now moving it over to the west edge. So this development, this first amendment proposes updating the development agreement to reflect that change. It keeps the same area, the 15 acres, and it keeps the required minimum width, 125 feet, and it keeps the requirement for Gardner's contribution to the park. And we have included rather in this one an updated set of proposed improvements. So you remember from the first development agreement, we had kind of a concept plan that had a variety of amenities in it, sports fields, food truck, etc. That same type of plan has been prepared and included in this text amendment, or this development agreement amendment. The one thing in that section that hasn't quite been addressed that we'll need to get into more detail with as some of those future park segments are built is that minimum width. There are sections of the park that do fall below that required width of 125 feet. Nothing that we're addressing right now with Zions or this first phase, or even probably the next few buildings will impact that one, but we will need to probably address that as we get a little farther along. It does have an update for the Homes project just to document that they're allowed more units. They've already gotten that approval or are almost ready to start construction, so that doesn't really change anything. We've updated the phasing to show how we anticipate the road network being installed and the future development projects coming through in a broad or at a broad level, looking at a few buildings at a time, seeing where those will go so that we can guide infrastructure and other investments in that area. And then again, as I mentioned with the text amendment, this development agreement does require the city to take on some responsibility for maintenance of improvements after they're constructed. We'll get those new public roads as they go in, we'll get the park as they go in, and we'll get trail connections that we'll need to account for as we move forward with those maintenance responsibilities. The first park section is anticipated to come online at the same time that Zions is finished, in just a little under 2 years from now. So we will need to look at making sure we have a capability to maintain that area once that's finished. But again, we haven't done any sort of detailed analysis of what that will look like. And that's it. This is for Gardner's master development agreement. We'll have a second development agreement in a second for Zions. And those two together plus the text amendment basically finish this first major phase in that approval process. Any questions?
Alex, council, is there any questions or comments you'd like to ask Alex? Okay, hearing none, I entertain a motion.
Mayor, one more thing on the motion. I realized just barely that in my staff report, I mentioned suspending the rules, but the council did already consider this one or discuss it once. So we don't really need to suspend the rules to approve this one if that's the motion that the council wishes to take.
Alex? Council?
Are you ready for a motion then?
I am ready.
I move that we adopt resolution number 2020 R31, approving the First Amendment to the amended and restated master plan development agreement for Jordan Bluffs.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this motion? Hearing none. Rory, would you ask the questions?
Yes, Councilmember Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
Yep.
Yeddle,
Yes.
Barry,
Aye.
and Glover.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take action item B. Consider resolution 2020 R32 approving the proposed development agreement for Zions Bank. Alex, fill us in.
Hey, so we talked about this one too, and this one hasn't changed since last meeting. This is the development agreement for the Zions project in specific. This is a requirement as part of the zoning ordinance. It requires a large-scale master plan to be approved by the Planning Commission, and then a development agreement to be approved by the council for each pod that gets developed on Jordan Bluffs. So this development agreement and the attached large-scale master plan authorized the 400,000 square foot office building with approximately 1,600 parking spaces and the landscaping and other amenity improvements that are going to be installed around there. The Planning Commission approved the large-scale master plan earlier this year, back in June. And since then, we've been working on the development agreement. So what it will do is essentially bind Zions to the large scale master plan. We still need to go through the final site plan and then the building permitting and engineering approvals before construction can begin, but we're rapidly working through those. It does replace the master development agreement on this piece. Normally we would have them overlap, so the MDA and the development agreement site specific would remain in effect, but this one was written in such a way that it replaces the MDA, which doesn't create any sorts of problems. It's just a kind of a quirk that was written into this one. Does require compliance with the active regulatory controls and ordinance requirements on the site. And it does allow limited public access to certain areas on Zion's property, specifically that perimeter trail that connects Bingham Junction Boulevard near the Center Street intersection down to the Parkway Trail connection at the southwest corner. It is, now that we've approved the text amendment and the MDA, it's basically the next step and the final step in this level of review so that we can get Zion's moving forward. Again, we talked about this one last time, so we don't need to suspend the rules, even though that's what I put in my recommended motion. And if you need anything else from me, I'm happy to answer questions. Jennifer was here. She might have been bumped out. She can answer from Zion's as well.
If we approve this tonight, how long are we looking at for construction to start?
Gardner is anticipating starting the dirt work next month. So they'll start moving dirt around on there and getting some of the geotechnical work finished, hopefully by this year. The entire project is supposed to finish up in June of 22. So we'd have a little under 2 years of construction, although Gardner is definitely motivated to get it moving.
And Alex, with the dirt work, we have the same sort of dirt and dust abatement procedures in place for that, because I know there were some complaints with the first phase.
Yes, so they will have a SWIP in place, and Dave Clark in our engineering department or division is the one that enforces that. So if you do get complaints about dust, send them to Dave, and Dave will go out there and make sure that they're doing everything possible to keep it down. Some of the complaints with that Wasatch Phase 1 project were things that were really hard to manage, because it was like they were running water trucks, but it just ended up being really windy. And
yeah,
without shutting them down and drenching the whole site, there isn't really a whole lot that can be done, but Dave stays on top of it as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Groundbreaking is set for the 19th of August for your information.
Yes.
Okay, is there a motion on this action item?
Mayor, I move that we in 2022 authorize and corporate project as presented.
Wait, did everyone hear that? It was broken up for me.
It was for me too.
Okay. Quinn, you might want to read that again.
I'll make it again. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Yes.
I move that we adopt resolution 2020 R32, authorizing the mayor to enter into the development agreement for the Zions Bank Corporation project as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussions on this motion, please? Hearing none, Rory, would you ask the questions?
Yes, Councilmember Brown,
Yep.
Gettle,
Yes.
Barry,
Aye.
Glover,
Aye.
and Robinson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to action item C, to consider ordinance number 2020-0-10, approving the vacation of city-owned rights of way located west of Bingham Junction Boulevard around being specific, Ivy Drive and Binary Way. Alex, explain.
Yep. So this was the one that we held the public hearing for last meeting, where Gardner requested vacation of the Binary Way and Ivy Drive rights of way west of Bingham Junction Boulevard. Those were originally dedicated on the first plat that came through that created a boundary for the Zions project that was based on the old text, the old language in the zoning ordinance. With the new proposal, it was necessary to vacate those rights of way and rededicate them. So that plat that we went through a few minutes ago had the first segment of binary way on it. Future plats that we go through will continue and make that connection all the way through. The council and the planning commission both reviewed the request. Council ultimately approved it last meeting and directed us to bring back an ordinance, which is required for all street vacations. So this ordinance documents that decision process and formally vacates that right of way or those rights of way and returns them to Gardner and Zion's ownership. And then they'll start getting replatted as future developments come in. Back to you, Mayor.
Any questions for Alex on this ordinance? Okay, a motion, please.
Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance 2020-010 vacating the binary way and Ivy Drive rights of way located west of Bingham Junction Boulevard.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on this action item. Any questions or comments on the motion? Rory, would you ask the questions?
Yes, Councilmember Gettle,
Yes.
Barry,
Aye.
Glover,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
and Brown.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move now to our final action item to consider ordinance number 2020-011, an ordinance establishing temporary land use regulations regarding allowed multifamily uses in the single-family residential zone SF1 and single-family residential zone SF2. Nate, your turn.
Great. So this is a follow-up from 2 weeks ago. During the work session, council and staff had a discussion about the single-family 1 and single-family 2 zones and what are allowed in those zones. Staff presented an overview of that. And then staff also went through a list of possible remedies and improvements that we might want to look into further. In the course of that meeting, Councilmember Glover brought up the idea of, while we work through that process of putting a moratorium on master plan developments within those single family 1 and single family 2 zones. We discussed that and talked about specifically repealing that section of the code under the MPD in both these zones that allows for multifamily use. And so the ordinance that is before you would be a 6-month repeal of that specific section of that code in the MPD in both of those zones that says allowed multifamily use if the proposed design is compatible with adjacent single family uses. So by repealing this, staff will continue to work on those different strategies. One of them was pulling out this section of the code, but we've brought back this ordinance to do that. At the time, the majority of council indicated that they would be in favor of doing an ordinance similar or the same as what is being presented here. So I could present any more details on that, but that is the basic gist of this item.
Questions or comments for Nate?
Hey, can you explain very briefly for anyone who might be tuned in for this, just the differences between an SF1 and an SF2?
Yeah, the basic differences between the SF1 and SF2 is the SF2 has the ability to have a duplex overlay zone on it, where the SF1 doesn't have that ability. There might be some other nuances between the two. In reading through them, I did never see those, but Alex would be able to comment in more detail on that.
Yeah,
I think you're right. Generally, that's the big difference.
Well, just to clarify, that SF2 and SF1 are both single family. Duplexes are in the duplex overlay, which only applies to SF1. The primary difference between the two 1 and 2 zones is lot size and setbacks. An SF2 zone has a 5,000 square foot minimum. SF1 has a 7,000 square foot minimum. And then they have some setbacks that correspond to the differences in the lot size or lot areas.
And I know we talked about the 6 month. Does staff feel that they need a full 6 months? Because I don't want to put this into place just to stymie development for 6 months and then come back and say, oh, well, we can't do it. You know, I don't want this just to be a temporary Band-Aid that we're going to rip off in 6 months. So do you think that you need 6 months to come back to us with an actionable plan?
No, our plan is to come back in a quicker amount of time than that. After looking at it with noticing and whatever how many conversations we may need to have on what those options are, it may be 6 months, but at any time, if council comes up with an option that they like, then that automatically replaces, and that will nullify this ordinance at that point.
And I think it just needs to be clear, you know, this doesn't impact any current applications or developments or anything along those lines, right?
Yeah, so if, and we tried to be clear in section 2 that this would apply to projects that have not yet vested or who might submit an application for multifamily plan developments after the ordinance is adopted. So we're clear on who it applies to there. So anyone who currently has vested rights or who has already submitted an application, this ordinance would not apply to them.
Yeah, I guess that's more for like if someone's listening in right now or something along those lines, and they think, you know, there's like an 8 unit coming up that people, you know, are upset about and whatnot, but it doesn't apply necessarily to those ones. It's an unvested property.
Right.
Could we make public any of these projects if this passes tonight, which I assume that it will? Any projects that meet any of these exemptions? Because I mean, 6 months is a long time, you know. So I mean, maybe not in 2020. I don't know how that's going for everyone else, but you know, 6 months is a long time. So you know, if there's something that is in the works now that doesn't start breaking ground until 5 months from now, you know, there could be very reasonable people thinking, well, hey, wait a minute, I thought we put a stop to this. So could you guys maybe let us know of any projects that will be exempted if we pass this tonight? If there are any. If they're not, that's great. That's easy for everyone.
There are a few, and I could put together a list for that.
Okay. And if you could, in that list, indicate when the like groundbreaking or construction, anything like that is set to begin, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can put a status in there and an expected construction timeline.
Okay. And my other question is just from a legal perspective. This could be for Lisa if she's still here, or Garrett, whoever. If I'm a developer who comes in 60 days from now with a great new plan, how is this ordinance, does this ordinance protect us from any sort of liability of hey, you've approved these projects in the past, mine's even smaller than some of these other ones that you've approved? We're pretty, you think that we're pretty significantly covered by this?
You mean if we change the ordinance during this moratorium period, and it is different than what developments we've approved in the past?
Yeah, I guess I mean that, or more so, you know, that during the moratorium, someone who wants to has plans of a development like this, who now can't for 6 months at least.
It's certainly within your power to rezone, change the zone, and there's no vested rights unless they have a completed application. So just the anticipation of what they believe that the zoning is going to be, or what they or what they plan on it being, unless they have a completed application. It's not, they don't have a vested right in the zoning. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. So you're just saying generally, if someone were to propose something and we reject them saying that, hey, we have this 6-month moratorium, that's not going to come back to bite us in some way.
Yeah, no, we have 6 months where we can not accept any applications. So yeah, we're okay with that.
Okay.
But only once. We can only do that once.
Yeah, we can't just keep doing it to
Right.
just kick the can down the road.
Right.
I mean, my personal opinion, I understand that there's a lot of public interest, but normally that public interest only rises when one of these types of developments goes into a very specific neighborhood. And then, you know, the other 99% of the city doesn't care about that particular area until it comes closer to them. So, you know, I do have some troubles with this because we are very much stymieing development in the city by passing this. So I might be in the very extreme minority amongst the other council members, but yeah, just saying that none of this development is allowed in Midvale for the next half of one entire year seems a little extreme. I don't know what can come of this that's going to change anyone's mind who's already spoken publicly about how they feel about this particular type of development in an SF1 or an SF2. So it does, even though Lisa, you're saying this is allowable for us to do, it does seem like we're just doing it to kick the can down the road.
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying, and the public policy consideration and why this is allowed under state law is because these types of decisions are so they're complex and they take a fair amount of consideration, and it's not something that, you know, the knee-jerk reaction to changing a zone is also can be very detrimental. And so this allows you as a council to take some time to truly determine what kind of zoning changes you want to make, and not just be in reaction to one development, if that makes sense. So I totally understand what you're saying. That's I think why it's allowed, though, is because these matters can take a lot of time, or should take a lot of time to consider before implementing.
It's an interesting discussion I've had. I've had quite a few people contact me from these that are not in my area to discuss it, and then when I, you know, kindly remind them that, you know, 30-ish units were put up without much problem in my area, they all seem kind of shocked. So it kind of goes to what Dustin says. They just don't know about it until it hits their area. You know, all of the, like the 3 things right now on the docket, you know, that 8 units over by, you know, Quinn's house and whatnot, don't even equal the total amount of units that were just put in by mine. So we saw this coming. We could have probably worked on it sooner. This isn't an indication towards the staff or anything. I didn't mean it that way, but it was very foreseeable with the way the land use in Midvale was going, and we had been very okay voting for it in other areas. And so, I mean, I'm glad we're trying to do something now, but it's also a little, I don't know, comical might be the word, when every one of these people ask me, hey, why are we doing this? It's like, we'll be doing it for years, you know, yeah, I think that's a conversation we need to have to make sure we're consistent, because I don't have a problem with the 8 units going over in District 1 compared to the 30 by me. I mean, we have to deal with it every day. So,
and I don't think that the public outcry was any different than it was for any of the other projects. It was just that we had a very different online meeting process in place that caused even more A, confusion, B, chaos, and C, just maybe more
And there's
disgruntled.
multiple. There's like multiple at one time opposed to just like one.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't think that, there's any larger percentage of people that are against this one development that's happening over there than was, as Brian said, the townhomes that went in his district. I just think it was again, I'm going to use the word confluence again for the second time tonight, confluence of events that has led us to where we are. So, part of me thinks that what we're doing now is what you said, Lisa, a knee-jerk reaction to a project or two.
Well, we have to go back. I mean, Brian, the project by you, we put a moratorium in place for that area as well. The problem is they had already vested.
No, I get it. I'm just saying,
yeah,
when we did that moratorium, we maybe should have thought about this then.
Yeah, but yours was in the transit-oriented development versus the single-family homes. I guess the big question we have to ask.
Which is next to it, yeah.
Yeah, but the big question we have to ask is, do we want to keep our single-family residential areas intact, or do we want it to be encroached over and over again into these PUDs? That's the question you have to ask yourself. I mean, what do we want to continue to have more high impact on our single family homes? And that's just a question. It's either you do or you don't.
One thing that I think gets lost in the discussion is that, it's not some like evil group of people who are just buying. I mean, our residents of Midvale are the ones who sell their property to developers. So, we have residents who are making an informed decision to sell their properties to someone that they know is going to develop into the types of things that we see here. So
I would be shocked if they all knew that that's what, the outcomes would be, right? They'll just go to the highest bidder. But on that scenario, we also do have some citizens of Midvale that are doing the developments. So there's that side of it as well. So there are obviously people in Midvale that want it because they're doing it and they live here. I don't know.
And the ones who willingly sell to a developer that they probably know what the plan is.
The thing about what we're doing tonight is it's going to give us the opportunity to have this discussion and to get public input and to see what we really want. And that's what I want, is to be able to have this conversation. So that's what we're doing.
Open it up last time. That's what I just don't get. We did a moratorium for my area. Everyone said we hate this, and then we didn't do anything. I don't know. It's a weird thought process for my area.
What happened at the end of that moratorium?
They vested to the highest they could build because they didn't want to dig a level deeper for parking. So it was smaller, but it was because it was cheaper, not because he didn't want to go up using the TOD zone. And he said, I'm just going to do flat. I'm not going to dig because it's too expensive, and I'll just go to the maximum. Then we redid some TOD zoning a little bit, but we didn't do anything in the SF1 or SF2 zones, which we probably should have at that time.
I agree with you on that. But we did make some of those changes in the transit orients to be able to help some of that.
If I could chime in real quick. Both of those projects you're mentioning wouldn't be affected by this moratorium. The one on Center Street, not only is it in the TOD zone, but it's not a master plan development. It's a multifamily residential project, and they, while very similar, have different requirements. So the multifamily residential development wouldn't be affected by this unless it were in a master plan development. The one up on Casablanca is also a multifamily residential development, and it's not in single family either. So even if those applications hadn't come in already, they wouldn't be affected by this moratorium. In fact, I can only think of a handful of projects in the pipeline right now that
would fit.
Yeah, like there's one there was one that we've been talking to an engineer about, and we told him that the moratorium was a possibility tonight, and I don't know if he got his application in on time. I need to check with my staff on that one. But there's only like 3 that I can think of at the moment.
Alex, the Casablanca, however you say that property, obviously I don't think we can make a change for that now, but for those properties that neighbor an SF1 zone, can we write something into those properties that the egress have to be on the main roads? Because I think some of the things that could have helped my development is if everything entered on Center Street, this development, if everything sort of entered in on, is it 7th or 9th East, wherever it's at, instead of entering it into these neighborhood roads, if you force them onto the main roads, because it feels like they're part of the SF1 zone because they're using the road to get into their property. And I don't know if that would help Quinn's area out at all. At least, I don't think you can change it now, but they could at least feel like there won't be a lot of parking on that road necessarily or whatever.
It's something that we could try, but I have a sinking suspicion that it wouldn't be very successful. We actually have a provision like that in 7200 South Overlay along Fort Union Boulevard. And it's one of the hardest ones that we've had to deal with because when you get streets like Fort Union or State or Center or 7th or 9th, you don't want to have more access points on there because it makes those streets more dangerous for the users of the street. And that's why we say, State and 9th are ones where UDOT is pushing us to have fewer access points or eliminate access points and not add new ones. That is something we could look at doing. We'd have to do it in probably every zone because
just generally applicable.
Yeah. And then we'd have to probably write in some, I don't want to call it an exception, but some way to address what happens if there's another organization or entity that doesn't let us do that. Like if UDOT doesn't let us access on their road, are we really saying that you can't develop that property?
Yeah, I just think it would be, it's just something to explore because I think it would have helped. They almost built like an access to it on the one by me, and then there's like a gate there instead. Where they put their for lease sign.
Yep.
They could have put a road there, I think. I don't know. Yeah. Or adjusted it. I don't know about Quinn's. I think that could be some of the heartache because it's sort of at the end of this road. Now there's 1 home's turning into 8. But I would also like during this moratorium to look into how we can capitalize off these. I don't know if there's a way that we can, if someone tears down a single family home, to build multiple homes, that the fee is higher. Because in my mind, it shouldn't, if so many at once makes it seem like it's lucrative, right? All of a sudden we're having multiple of these, so we should be able to cash in as a city as well.
Yeah, and that was one of the optional strategies that we looked at. And when I looked at the survey, everyone who's taken it so far indicated that was one that they wanted to look into. So we will look into that piece.
Nate, can you send it to my personal email? Every time I've tried to click on it, it's gone to a dead link.
Sure.
I'll talk to you.
I know the one person who hasn't taken it yet. So.
Yeah, me. Every time I've clicked on it, it hasn't worked.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
I guess the only other thing I'd like to ask, because I know it'll make a difference whenever we make the motion, but do we think that 6 months is the number that we should put on it, or should we go lower?
Well, personally, I think we ought to do the 6 months because if we need that time, we'll have it. And that's what we can have by law. I think we ought to give the staff recommendation to try to get this done as soon as we can. I don't think we ought to take this whole 6 months, but if that's what it takes and that's what we need, then we need the time to do it. If we don't, let's move it on.
I'm with Councilman Glover on this because as Lisa was saying, we can't do a second one, right? And so if she's if staff's backed into 2 or 3 months and they needed an extra week or 2, but we cut them off, we kind of handcuffed them, but we can easily move quicker than 6 months, but we can't add on. So I agree with Glover, but let's try to do it quicker.
I just think, Lisa, is it, we couldn't do 3 months and then extend another 3 months?
I believe you can extend it.
Up to 6
But-
months?
But Alex, can you do that? Can you extend? Or Nate? I think you can extend it, but it would be no more than 6 months. I think that 6 months I mean, I would recommend that you do it for the 6 months.
Okay.
Well, and this is written to automatically expire once a revision is adopted, so.
Right, so
think
if
that's
it's done before.
It doesn't go any longer.
And,
Right.
and whatever revision is made, we'll probably have to do some noticing around that. So it gives us time to fit all that noticing in as well.
Okay. All right, I'm coming along to the 6 months. I wasn't there to begin with, but because I mean, human beings, myself included, being who we are, if you put something with a 6 month time frame on it, then it's probably going to take 6 months. And if you put a 3 month time frame on it, it's probably going to take 3 months. So, but if everyone seems to agree that 6 is the way to go, then that's cool with me.
Okay. We ready to make a motion on this?
I'll make the motion. I move that we adopt ordinance number 2020-0-11, an ordinance establishing temporary land use regulations regarding allowed multifamily use in the single-family residential F1 and single-family residential SF2 zones as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments on this motion? Hearing none, Rory, would you ask the questions?
Yes, so Councilmember Sperry,
Aye.
Glover,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
and Gettle.
Yes.
Thank you.
We have a closed session tonight to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to go into a closed session.
Mayor, I move that we go into a closed session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Rory, would you ask the question?
Yes, Councilmember Robinson.
Who?
Robinson,
Yep.
Gettle,
Yes.
Glover,
Aye.
Sperry,
Aye.
and Brown.
Yes.
Okay, we need a few minutes for IT to get the recording ready.